would you waste your time? Oh, and she says, what's so good about staying inside?
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Williams.
I'm here.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Snipper.
Here.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
And Councilmember Clay will not be here this evening. She's out of town on business. We'll proceed with the first part of the agenda. We may need to reorder a couple things at the beginning. We had a reception for former Councilmember Barry, and we have some items at the beginning of the agenda for honoring him, but he hasn't made it here yet because of the terrible accident on the Metro. They're still in the process of trying to get here, and when he arrives, we will reorder things as we need to. I know we're still waiting to hear what's happening with that accident that occurred very near Tacoma Park, and I know there were some fatalities and some injuries. It looks pretty bad, but it may have affected some people's ability to get here in a timely fashion, including Councilmember Barry and his family. And since I'm talking, I'll just make a comment or two and then look to my colleagues for other comments. I did want to note that in today's Washington Post, there was a story about municipalities in Montgomery County dealing with Pepco's offer to change all streetlights and upgrade them to a different kind of bulb, and whether Pepco would also consider replacing streetlights with LEDs and the relative costs. And I haven't heard anything about Pepco contacting the city. It sounds like they're kind of rolling through different areas of the county. They're currently over in the Chevy Chases and Somerset. I think it would be good for us to follow that issue and have some conversations as Pepco gets to us. It basically said that Pepco would replace all of the existing lights with another kind of light that my recollection is that it's kind of orange and bad light and you can't see very well with it, so that I can imagine that we might react to that offer by saying either leave what we've got or, yeah, we want those LEDs that the other people want. So I think that's something that's going to be coming up. And the other thing was that at various times, as I've approached this building, I've noticed various banners on the front railing at the corner of Maple and Philadelphia, and frankly, my reaction is that some of them look pretty sad and pretty tacky. And I know that the city manager has kind of tightened the ability of various people to put banners up there, but they're still going up there, and we may want to have a discussion about that and see what we might want to do, since I think without some direction from us, we'll still kind of limp along with some banners up there. And I know that there are good reasons for informative banners to go up there, but I think we need a better method of dealing with that. So if my colleagues think that's a good idea, we'll put that
How big a
Other-
banner can I put up?
2 inches by 2 inches. Other council comments? Councilmember Wright.
I would, related to the banners, I would go back to something I saw in Cape Cod. I think it was last summer, maybe the summer before, where a town had constructed an actual 2 nice, high-quality white wooden posts that had grooves in the inside, and people could make placards of a certain size, paint them however they wanted, and then they slid down into the, and they had it so, 3 of them could be stacked up at one time. I think it's probably a pretty low-cost and option, but still creates something that's attractive for people. So I'd be a fan of that related to banners, but I know we're not discussing that tonight.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. I won't bring up the suggestion several years ago, which was an electronic billboard similar to what CVS uses in front of their store.
With red lights, right?
Of course.
Flashing.
But I did want to ask the city manager, I know several years ago, at staff suggestion, when we were worried about parking at the community center, or the lack of parking at the community center, we developed a plan for putting in some parking spaces on either side of Maple Avenue. And I noticed today they were refreshing the yellow paint on the curb across the street from the community center. And I'm just curious why we widen the road to put in parking spaces and then don't let people park there. And I'm not sure I need an answer tonight.
Yeah, let me talk to staff, Councilmember Siemens, and refresh my memory on that issue.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
I probably ought to talk to the chief about this out of here, not in this context, but I'm going to mention it anyway. One of my constituents got a ticket parking on the corner in front of their house, which was, they were too close to the corner, and then it was a legitimate ticket. They were concerned, though, because on the ticket it said that our law says you're not to park within 40 feet of a corner. I didn't look at the ticket, so I'm not positive that's the case. That's a long ways. And so if it really is 40 feet on the ticket, if that's the law that you can't park within 40 feet of the corner, then I'll want to talk, maybe we can talk about whether that's a realistic distance from the corner. And that right now, because because my neighbor saw that that was the requirement, she feels sheepish about parking in front of her house even 20 feet away from the corner, which she's done for many, many years. So maybe we can talk about that in the future. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, then if there are no other comments, then I'll just touch on a brief agenda update or two. I want to remind everybody that the City Council will not be meeting next week since we'll be in Ocean City for the annual Maryland Municipal League Convention. So our next meeting after tonight is Monday, July 6th. And one of the things that we're going to have during that meeting is a presentation on the proposed Public Works Facility Master Plan, and that will be a presentation by the architects that we hired to come back with some ideas about what to do there. And there's also, we have scheduled a resolution commenting on the proposed elementary school boundary redistricting. And I did want to also point out that before we go on our August break after July 27th, that I do intend to schedule an item as a follow-up to the request about what to do about gas leaf blowers. And on Monday, July 13th, we're scheduled to have not have a council meeting, but a workshop on the Tacoma-Langley Sector Plan Montgomery County version, and that meeting will be at a site to be determined in Ward 6. And then the following week, the 20th, we've tentatively scheduled a resolution providing comments on the Montgomery County sector plan. And we've also scheduled on that meeting, July 20th, an ordinance awarding a contract for the renovation of this room. The next item is public comment period. For anybody who'd like to comment on anything that's not on the agenda and not on our regular meeting voting agenda. And if you can please identify yourself and keep your comments to 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland. Yep, they call me the peace delegate at Tacoma Park. I also wanted to ask people, I've brought some cards with Terry Siemens for Doug Barry. He's leaving our council member, and I wanted to give him a peaceful sign-off. That's where you wonder if you go, why I got the peace sign out. It's because I want to give him a peaceful send-off and remind him to carry the spirit of Tacoma Park
And Pat-
wherever he goes.
Pat, Mr. Berry just entered the room, so he's hearing you now.
He is?
Yes, he just got here.
Oh, good. And also, I got a card for Nellie Moxley's family, a condolences card, and I want everybody to sign it if possible. If nobody has signed it, I think Jesse has it. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And I want everybody to sign it to show their appreciation for a long time and well-spoken activist at Tacoma Park who recently passed away. You know, and we're going to miss you, Nellie, wherever you are. So I imagine your spirit's right here in council chambers with us today. And also, 4th of July is coming up, and I want to ask the people, also the city council if possible, to put up notices that parents have to watch their children at all times now. Because there's been an awful lot of tragedies throughout the country. The kids being killed, buried in shallow graves, raped, molested, and whatever. And just because somebody's registered doesn't mean they can't commit the crime again. And we've got to make sure that we watch our children in all our city functions. I would like to see on the flyers that are going to be put out for the folk festival, the jazz festival, the street festival, and other festivals. I would like to see see written on the flyers and the advertisements, parents must keep their children in sight at all times, and it should be mandatory. It should be mandatory. And if anyone sees a toddler out there roaming around unwatched, please bring him over to the police station or over to the information booth and find their families. And please, it would hurt me and tear me up so bad every time I see a child hurt. And I want to do everything I can as a peace activist to remind everybody we don't want to have a black mark on our city because some kid was found missing, tortured, or raped, or buried in a shallow grave. We cannot let that happen. You know, and that's one way we can show our appreciation for our city and our people, because those children are going to be our future leaders. Okay, and I just want to tell everybody that, Doug, I want you to have a peaceful send-off, and remember, keep Tacoma Park in your heart wherever you go. And also, I want to thank Nellie for the work she's done as a peace activist. And I'm going to continue on my work as a peace activist. And now that the kids are out of school, please, I want to see more kids coming out here to sit in the audience here and give their input too, because their voice is very valuable, just as valuable as mine is. If you're wondering how I can do it, just come on out and do it. It's not that hard. Just come on out and speak. Come on out and show your city and your country that you care. Please. You know, it's really informative when you do it. You're going to learn an awful lot about how your city works, what you can do to actually help make it work. We are the government. We vote. And please, I want to see more people out there voting this year. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you.
Remember, keep an eye on your kids on the 4th of July.
Hi, good to see you again. I'm Chuck Thomas, live on Tacoma Avenue, and I'm here to report on some new developments in the school boundary matter. over the past few days, our petition, which has now been signed by nearly 100 people, was, and this is calling for neighborhood representation from each of the underrepresented neighborhoods. It was now signed by 10 ministers representing 7 different congregations. It's a Catholic priest and ministers from the United Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, Lutheran Church, an African Methodist Episcopal Church, and a Unitarian Church. And they're signing on because they're recognizing that it's wrong to not give people, especially the underprivileged people of the Overlook, a voice on an advisory council that's making decisions that affect their lives. I have here a report on the signers from the Overlook. 40 residents signed it. Of those, 20 are affected families. That is, they have kids who would be either sent to a different school, elementary or middle, under the options on the table. I got the chance to ask 15 of them their opinions on Sligo Creek versus Tacoma Park elementaries and the middle schools. 12 of them preferred Sligo Creek and Silver Spring Middle, most of them strongly. 2 had no opinion. They said they were fine either way, and 1 slightly preferred Tacoma Park. I estimate that there's 36 affected families in SC5, and the 24 of them are in the Overlook. So of the 20 signers, 75% of them voted, and of those, 80%, actually 90% of those with an opinion, prefer Sligo Creek. So it turns out that they were not just unrepresented on the advisory committee. They were misrepresented. We've been being told all along, and there's still some people digging in their heels today saying that the Overlook was fairly represented. Or there was a meeting, if they had to work or otherwise couldn't make it, tough cookies. Almost all the families that I talked to didn't even know that this process was going on. I've been told all kinds of misinformation about the Overlook residents. A former city council member representing Ward 6 told me, well, part of the problem is they don't vote, they're very transient. Now, I did talk to a few people who said, with young kids who said, oh, well, we're going to be moving soon anyway. But I also talked to a young man in his early 20s who was one of the first kids at the Sligo Creek Elementary School. He's been living in the same place for 15, 20 years. I don't know if there's anyone in this room that's ever lived in the same building for 15 or 20 years. I haven't. I met families who don't vote, who, when I talked about meeting with the school board member, I said, just tell them what you're telling me right now. There's just this shyness, really, this political disempowerment that really takes effort to transcend. It takes more than just the Boundary Advisory Committee having one meeting in the Tacoma Park Recreation Center on New Hampshire Avenue. It takes the kind of effort that I'm putting into, and the school system didn't do it, and that's why they're misrepresented and why we need to reopen the process and get full representation for every neighborhood on the Boundary Advisory Committee, and make sure that their interests are actually represented instead of misrepresented. So along with Casa de Maryland and a couple of other civil rights groups and all of the clergy signed on, I'll be continuing to plug away and continuing to report back. And I do want to say, you said to comment on things not on the agenda. Since the Ward 6 appointment is on the agenda tonight, I don't know if I can comment on that now or if there's another point in the meeting to comment, but I've been concerned all along that Ward 6 on this council is unrepresented during this time, and I want to make sure that there's some discussion, some question and answer from you all of the Ward 6 appointee about these concerns of the underprivileged residents of the Overlook and a willingness to go to bat for them. And finally, as the first speaker talked about registering to vote, I would also like to conclude by asking that the city consider investing some resources, hire some voter registration, profit, nonprofit, whatever, somehow find a way to get people at the Overlook and the other low-income apartments in Ward 6 registered to vote. I think what's happening now in the school board is shining light on what kinds of things happen when people are overlooked. and let's make sure that, that they all have a voice in the ballot box in November. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments. Anybody else like to make public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the city manager's comments.
I think we've all heard about the terrible accident on the Metro, and Chief Rakucci and his staff have been monitoring it. I thought it might be of some interest to the council to have the latest information that the chief has received.
At approximately 5:03 tonight, there was an accident of two Metro trains on the northbound lane to Shady Grove between Fort Totten and Tacoma Park. Apparently, one train was stopped and the other train ran into it. That's the briefest of information they're revealing right now. The big thing right now is for those, and I know there's probably some Tacoma Park residents involved, and we pray that none of them were hurt and are all safely home. But if any resident has questions, there's a number you can call, and they'll try to give you the most up-to-date information they have. That is 202-727-9099. Right now, there's some roads closed. Obviously, Tacoma Park Metro Station is closed. There's no information available yet on what stations and how Metro will operate. Obviously, as we speak, they're probably working on that. I would advise you to go to their website or any of the 5 TV channels which are continuous coverage at this point for more information on that. The streets that are closed at this time is New Hampshire Avenue north and southbound in D.C., North Capitol Street both directions in D.C., Eastern Avenue at northwest in both directions, South Dakota northbound closed, and Nicholson Street northeast closed. The most up-to-date information we had from the press conferences at this time, there are 70 being treated with light injuries, 40 with medium, there's 2 with life-threatening, and there's now 4 confirmed deceased. We've been sending updates through the Tacoma Park Police Department to our residents to keep them updated on every information we get, and we will continue to do that through the night. Obviously, our prayers are with those that are deceased and with their families and the families of those that are injured. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chief.
Thanks. Just a few other items. On last Friday, we had a pre-bid conference for the auditorium renovation project. We had considerable interest. 13 firms attended the pre-bid conference, and as a reminder, bids are due in early July. We will be bringing forward a recommendation for the council to act on prior to your August recess. I did want to just note that there was a error that was referenced in the last newsletter relative to the issuance of Area B parking permits, and the police department has issued an advisory. In the newsletter, it stated that 9 Area B permits would be available through in-person application on a first-come, first-served basis beginning Friday, June 26th. That was a misprint. The actual date is Tuesday, June 30th. Wanted to share with the council that we have been advised that we were selected as a banner city by the Maryland Municipal League, and I think Councilmember Wright has agreed to be the flag bearer at the conference, and he will be noting that. And then the last thing I just wanted to call to the council's attention, I had received an email from Councilmember Siemens over the weekend asking for some additional information about the Prince George's County sector plan and some housing-related issues. I apologize for the lateness of this, but at your places at the dais is an email that I received a memo just prior to the commencement of the meeting from Alana Blanchard, and she will be prepared to answer any questions the council has about that information later this evening.
That's it. Any questions? Thank you. At this point, we'll move to our regular meeting agenda, and the first item on the agenda is a resolution recognizing retired Ward 6 City Council Member Doug Barry. Would somebody like to move the resolution?
I'll move it.
Second?
I think I heard Councilmember Robinson move it, and I think Councilmember Snipper moved it a millisecond behind, so he gets the second. The resolution is a little long to read, so I don't think we'll do that. But it does talk about Councilmember Barry's great efforts on behalf of the residents in Ward 6 over almost 6 years. And in particular, your efforts to enhance code enforcement in Ward 6 and to bring about traffic calming measures that I know have greatly improved the residability in the ward, and also a great deal of work on working with people toward moving the sector plan forward and working with all of the businesses in the Tacoma Langley Community Development Authority, Commercial Development Authority, and making great strides on New Hampshire Avenue and moving all of those plans forward. Just a great many things that you've put time in on, and really appreciate all of your efforts. And I know my colleagues have some other comments that they want to make. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. Mr. Berry, it's been a pleasure working with you on the council. I really have admired the leadership that you've shown in Ward 6. When I look at Ward 6 today and the difference between now and when you started, I see your fingerprints all over the ward. A lot of changes that have taken place because of your leadership. And I thank you for sharing that experience with us.
Councilmember Snipper.
And I especially want to thank you for all of your efforts on the farmers market, since that's been a really great boon to the rest of us, not just the residents of Ward 6.
Councilmember Robinson.
I want to thank you for helping us keep our meetings a little bit shorter by keeping your words concise and to the point and appropriate. And that was very helpful to me as a beginning council person. So, in addition to the other things that you have brought to the table, thank you for that.
Councilmember Wright.
First, I'd like to say thank you to you for representing all of Ward 6. I'm sure that over the many years you represented the ward, there's many times when you've dealt with issues for all the range of constituents that your ward has, and I can think of in particular in these Hampshire Towers when there's been individuals who've had issues with the management company that you've gotten the city involved in to address their issues. So I know that they thank you for that, and I thank you for that. Your word per effectiveness is probably the highest of anyone on the dais, so I thank you for your conciseness and your eloquence. And I can remember early on when I started on the council, I came down and had lunch with you and your work, and you gave me some sage advice. I tried to follow it, maybe not as effectively as you have always been in the honorable way you've conducted yourself up on the dais and in office. So I thank you for that advice.
And before we pass the resolution, is there any member of the public who would like to comment?
Yes, my name is Pat Lovelace again, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland. I want to thank you, Councilman Barry, for the work you've done throughout our whole city. Because what happens in Ward 6 affects all the wards in our city. And I want to ask you to carry the spirit of Tacoma Park with you wherever you go. Carry on the work for peace wherever you go, and help other of our communities become active too. Also, we got a card for you, and I want to know if everybody here signed that card, thanking him for the work he's done for my city. I think as a city, it really makes a difference when we show our people, both our elected officials and our activists, how we appreciate the work that they've done. And I think I want to tell you, Doug, thank you very much for the work you've done in our city. You've done an awful lot. Thank you very much.
Erwin Mag, Tacoma Langley Crossroads Executive Director, 22 years now in that association. I am tempted to say I'm glad to see Doug go, but it wouldn't come out right if I said it that way, because if I said it that way, I'd have to continue to say, because he has been such an inspiration for those who might follow him, that they would learn something from what he's done in the last 6 years. So maybe that muddle will help, Doug. We have never been unrepresented in Ward 6, but during those 22 years that I've been involved with the association, and more than that as a business owner, we've never had a time, except during your last 6 years, when as much progress has been made for redevelopment and for the improvement of the entire commercial district, as well as the Hampshire Garden Civic Association. So we regret truly that you are leaving, because we're at that crux right now with the sector plan, when your background would have been invaluable, and we could only hope that whoever follows you will benefit by talking with you, and we wish you Godspeed in your new location at home, and appreciate those 6 years of cordiality, humanity, and breakfast meetings.
My name is Neil Teague. I'm the president of Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority, 7676 New Hampshire Avenue, Tacoma Park. It's very easy to follow Erwin Mack because he always has such great eloquence. So I simply want to say, again, that it's been a pleasure to work with you, Doug. I'm very glad that you're not moving far, because we do intend to call upon you for your experience and wisdom, and hope to be working with you in the future. And again, wish you all the best in your new home. Thank you.
I just think Dad's a great dad, and he did a lot to help. And he did a lot to help everybody in the city. So thank you, Dad.
How do you follow that? That was Doug's daughter. Kathy Porter, 1000 block of Elm Avenue, and the former mayor of the city of Tacoma Park. I just had to come back this evening to wish Doug well. People have talked very justifiably about all the good things Doug did in Ward 6, and I would agree with all of that. He had a tremendous record of accomplishment. The council members have also talked about his contributions to the council and the council's operating, and I just wanted to focus on that a little bit. During the time that I was mayor, we had a few contentious issues now and then, and I always very much appreciated Doug's very calm and professional approach to things. Whether we were talking about things in a public meeting, whether there was a closed meeting or a council-only meeting, Doug always was very calm, very logical, very professional, and very reasonable in his approach. And there were times when that kind of approach was very important in sort of keeping the council moving forward. And I just wanted to tell you, in addition to everything else you've done, I very much appreciate that. Thank you, Doug.
Hi, Donna Victoria, 1104 Merwood Drive. I have known Doug the entire time he's lived in Tacoma Park, because Liz Ader lived on Wildwood before she brought Doug along. A wise move. And I just wanted to say again something I mentioned last week. About a week and a half ago, we had a terrible tragedy on Merwood Drive when an older neighbor, an 84-year-old woman, Marge McLaughlin, who had lived there for 50 years, died in a single-car accident. She actually was trapped underneath her own car. Unfortunately, I was the one who found Marge, and I made a call to 911, obviously. I hollered for a neighbor to help me, and then I called Doug, even though he and Liz and Alana had already moved. Partially because I knew Doug would know what to do, and partially because they were virtually the next of kin. She lived alone, she had very little family, and I think if people were reading it in the newspaper, they might think that this was a person who had been sort of tragically left aside by her community. But Liz and Doug and Alana saw somebody who was a little lonely and stepped in and really spent a lot of time with Marge, and took care of her, talked to her, met with her weekly. They had discussed with her moving into assisted living, and whether she wanted to go see places. They had met with other neighbors who were concerned about Marge, who were going to try and work more on taking care of Marge as she got older. And I know everybody knows the good work he's done on council, but I just wanted to tell something that people might not know about the kind of people Doug and Liz are, and how they stepped in simply because there was a need, And while Marge had a really tragic end, she did not have a tragic life. She wasn't alone, even though she lived by herself. And I just wanted to thank them again for taking control and helping us in a really difficult time a couple weeks ago.
Would anybody else like to comment? Okay, then if the council would like to vote on the resolution, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And Doug, if you'd like to come up, so you always remember your time on the council.
Oh, good grief.
I'll put it back in here.
So, yeah.
I promise not to fall out of the chair, Doug.
And if you'd like to make any comments, however brief they might be.
Thank you very much. I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience because of all the nice things that are being said, and I appreciate it very much, all of the things that you've said and all of the work that we've been able to do together. It is a solemn occasion tonight because of this terrible accident, so I'll try not to add the usual levity. Because I really felt terrible as I was following, not in a later train, but I managed to not go into the subway because my wife had called me to alert me about the accident that occurred, and it's just terrible. And I'd like to maybe ask for just a few seconds of silence for the people who passed away. Well, the many thousands of times I must have taken that very same metro train to Tacoma Park, I always was happy when I arrived at the Tacoma station. And I was happy because it was the place that I called home for all of these years, and my special part of it in Ward 6. Some of the neighbors have come out to celebrate this occasion. A couple are wearing the faded T-shirts. I think it's appropriate because so too a bit is the namesake of the person that adorns the front of those shirts. But there's something very special about a neighborhood, and we were reflecting on that just the other day when we met with some of the neighbors a couple of weeks ago on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And it was just a sense of comfort that one has living in a neighborhood where they're surrounded by people they care about. And it could be very subtle things like the flicker of a television set seen through a living room window. Maybe the last thing you see at night. You know someone is there. You know they're watching their favorite television program. It's comfortable to realize that. When you see the children running on the street and you see the pets, the dogs, cats who you know by name, the friendly waves of people, the special celebrations that you share on holiday times. You see the kids growing older. You see the old getting even older. And you see yourself also maturing as you live among these people. It's a sense of place, and it's a great comfort. Then once you move, you realize those important things that you take for granted and how really, really important they are. And I'm sure this is shared by communities all over the country, all over the world. Nothing special about Takoma Park as such. What is special, though, is Takoma Park has that sort of sense where you drop a pebble in a pond and you see the waves as they radiate outward. It's a small community in a small, tiny place in a huge country, but yet it is a community that cares deeply about the issues around it. And this has been very special about Takoma Park. And just to paraphrase that great little quote by the anthropologist on the front of our newsletter, it comes out every month. And the quote is, "It's amazing what a small group of dedicated people can do, the great change that they can bring about in the world." And certainly that fits, I think, Takoma Park very well. And I recall when I think the red light's going to go on here any second. I'll have to stop. Fitting, isn't it, after all the years on that side of the podium, and now I'll get a bit of my own medicine as the mayor, who I've really enjoyed serving with, and also former Mayor Porter. It's an honor to have you here tonight at this gathering. Will gavel me to a final close. But I did want also to mention Irwin and Neil, who are here tonight from the Business Association. It is true that Irwin and I would, and sometimes Neil, would often have early morning breakfast to talk about issues in the business district. We had those breakfasts often at a well-known pancake establishment in the ward. Won't call it by name, but we used to joke because of the crime rate in the area that the special on the menu was always bullets in a blanket. But thanks to Police Chief Rikuchi, the item on the menu has now returned to what it used to be called, and peace more or less prevails in an area of the city which was not always known for its peacefulness. And in closing, other than to say thanks to everyone else who came here tonight, and also to Donna, because you're in good hands with a new colleague, and there will be continuity, and there'll be, I'm sure, a person who will look after the interests of the ward and of the city come November. But I would like to exhort the city staff, who I have absolutely enjoyed working with, to the very first and last person on the roster, whether it be the refuse collectors, the police, the economic development folks, the folks in the housing department, just up and down the line. They're all great people, and in particular the city manager, who I've really, really enjoyed working with, and will miss the association that we have had. But I do hope you will continue the work that we have started together in the ward, and number one, continue to be aware of the code violations and difficulties, and that we have a great team of people out there now. Don't let your guard down. It's very important that we take care of those small things and make that part of the community very livable. The second thing is, it would be great to have a traffic circle on Kirkland Avenue near New Hampshire. And if somehow we can make that happen, then we will have not only more traffic coming on that end, but also the aesthetic beauty that comes with what happens when we turn that over to the arborist and the great folks who work outdoors, making the city as attractive as it is. And thirdly, remember the less well-off in the ward. I think this city probably does as well, if not better, than almost any place in the country when it comes to looking after people who, Pat, you know this, need that extra special attention. And I know through the the rent control and the housing programs that we have, that we will continue to do that. And, you know, one of the things going all the way back almost 6 years, the phone rang one evening, and it was a distressed person on the line, I think calling from the Overlook, Tacoma Overlook, and saying that she was about to be evicted, and what could she do about it? Her children were about to be thrown out on the street along with her, and I knew, because I was in one of the orientation sessions that occurred here for all the new council members, and I had heard in the presentation given by one of the city staff that there was a program that you could call, and they would advance the money for the rent payment to avoid this eviction, and then later the person would pay the money back. And a few weeks later, the telephone rang again. It was the same person saying the city came to my rescue. I was not thrown out on the street. I have a job now. I was able to pay back what was owed, and what a great place this is to live. And what I would say is, here, here, it is, and thanks to all of you, and I will not be a stranger, I can assure you, and I thank you for all of a great 6 years as my colleagues, those colleagues who are not here and have gone on to other things. It was great working with them as well, and thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
The next item on the agenda is a resolution appointing a new Ward 6 council member to fill the unexpired term of former council member Doug Barry. Would somebody like to move that resolution with a name? Moved by Councilmember Snipper. Thank you. Seconded by Councilmember Wright, and the name in that resolution is?
Donna Victoria.
Okay. Would anybody like to comment on the resolution? I'll just say that we were Donna Victoria. We were very happy that two residents of Ward 6 came forward and talked to us last week about their interest in filling the role of council member for the remainder of the term, and we were very gratified that someone as qualified and as steeped in the issues of the day and in the various issues in Ward 6 neighborhood came forward in the person of Donna Victoria, and we look forward to welcoming you as a colleague.
Nodding heads.
Is there any public comment on the resolution?
Kathy Porter again. I applaud the council for their selection of Donna Victoria. I had the opportunity to work with Donna off and on for much of the time that I was on the council, and I think that that's an excellent choice. Donna has great grounding in the community, has been for quite a long time, and she is exactly the kind of person who can step in without a great deal of learning curve and work effectively for Ward 6. So I applaud the council in that selection.
To follow up on what I mentioned before about the Overlook residents, but now specific to this matter at hand, as I mentioned, I was trying to get Donna on the phone to ask. Well, first of all, let me say I'm not by any means speaking for the residents of the Overlook. I'm only speaking for myself and the principle of neighborhood representation in this process. But I think we're within about a week or two of having some capable, able, ready spokespersons from the Overlook itself. But since we're in this kind of time pinch now, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is, well, Member Barry here that you interviewed, and he said he took notes at the meeting in SC4, SC5 in the rec center. I followed up with him, and he said that there was no distinction made between SC4 and SC5, or between renters and owners in SC4. I met one person in the Overlook who was at that meeting, and he said there were maybe 1 or 2 other Overlook residents there. So I guess one question is, are you willing to support advocating for neighborhood representation on the school's boundary advisory committee? And if not, then what information do you have from the SC4, SC5 meeting, or from folks that you know who served on the boundary advisory committee that contradict what I found, and that is that overwhelmingly the residents of the Overlook want representation on the boundary advisory committee. They didn't feel that they were represented. And again, 90% of those who expressed an opinion prefer Sligo Creek, which is the exact opposite of what the boundary advisory folks who live in SC4 were saying. So I was wondering if you might be able to comment on that and help share that with the residents of the Overlook, that I can show them on my computer, on my laptop, from the internet broadcast next time I'm there. Thanks.
Is there any other comment?
Erwin Mack, Executive Director, Tacoma Langley Crossroads. We are not allowed to politicize. This is an appointment after the fact. We're glad that you chose someone who is knowledgeable about the neighborhood and about the commercial sector, which will give you a heads up and a head start, if you will, on filling this vacancy for the interim. We look forward to working with you and having you sit on our board, and we'll keep you apprised of what's happening and look forward to meeting with you to make a fill-in. So we're glad that that vacancy is now taken care of.
Any other comments? Okay. I'm sure that Ms. Victoria will be happy to talk to anybody about any questions they might have or any issues they might want to take up. But at this point, I think we can vote on the resolution appointing Donna Victoria to fill the unexpired term. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Welcome, and you'll be sworn in at our next meeting, which is July 6th. And the next item on our agenda, you get to talk when you're sworn in. Next item on our agenda is the work session item on the Safe Roadways Committee annual report.
When is this swearing in? When is this swearing in?
July 6th.
An updated version, okay.
And we have the chair of the committee and staff as well.
Well, it looks like
No problem. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. No worries. Bob, no worries.
a few of the council members have taken a little break, but I think we can go ahead and get started.
Good.
Welcome you, and
Thank you.
Benita.
Thank you. Good evening, Council and Ms. Matthews. My name is Benita George, and I'm the staff that is assigned to work with the Safe Roadways Committee. The Safe Roadways Committee has been working diligently to adhere to your mandate, and they've been rather creative in their efforts. The plan for today is to basically give you a report about what we've been doing, and we're hoping that we will be able to come back in September and talk with you about some of the plans for the new fiscal year. But for today, we're simply going to talk about what we've done and what are some of the things that will be happening in the next couple of weeks. At this point, I will turn it over to Robert Patton, who's been the chair of the committee for a while. He's doing a great job at doing that, and so we'll let him talk right now.
Well,
our work session report that's in your packet summarizes the things we've been working on. The main thing that we've accomplished this year is actually correcting some mistakes in our signed bike routes that were installed about a year ago, and we're also able to extend the signed bike route. And I've just passed out a map. You also have one in your packet. They're pretty much the same. The latest map shows you a little bit broader view and some of the routes that we would hope to sign in the future. We didn't necessarily sign it to honor Councilmember Berry, but we have a bike route in Ward 6 connecting Sligo Trail with the business community, and that was one of the most important routes that our committee felt would really be beneficial, because many people, many people who don't live in Ward 6 don't know how to pass through that neighborhood to get to the commercial areas along New Hampshire Avenue and University Boulevard. The committee has also been following a study on ADA accessibility and sidewalk assessment that the staff has been directing, and has addressed a few other issues this year. The main thing that I wanted to say to the council is that we would like to be of greater service to the council in the future. We know that over the past few years, you've dealt with a lot of issues in our area: traffic calming, pedestrian safety, transit services, etc. And we would like to encourage the council to ask our opinion about issues when they come before you, have us do research or give you any perspectives or background on issues as they come up, so that we could have more dialogue between our committee and the council. Our committee probably doesn't have sufficient energy to raise a lot of issues, and as I've kind of followed city activities over the last year, it seems like the issues are raising themselves. So we would have plenty to do just to assist you in dealing with some of those type of issues. The other thing I'd like to ask is that we need to expand and diversify our membership on our committee, and specifically from Ward 6 and Ward 4, we don't have any representation. So we would be happy to have the council members from those wards, and if Donna, well, I guess she's stepped out, she can put this on her to-do list. We'd be happy to take the nominations from the council members, or if you have multiple people, you can connect them to the city offices, and they can go through the application process. That's pretty much the extent of my report. At this point, I can answer any questions. Well, I should say that, as Vanita said, in the past we've had about $10,000 per year that we've spent in doing the bike route signs and doing a variety of other things. And this coming year, I've been informed that we don't have a specific amount in the budget, but we continue to have a small work program, so we will be bringing to you specific items as we get into the beginning of the budget year. And they will probably predominantly be oriented towards continuing to sign some of the future bike routes that are marked on this map, which are the black dotted lines. So if anybody have any questions about these existing or future routes or anything else, I'd be happy to take them.
Did you have some comments?
Yes, I also wanted to bring to, just to mention, it's in your report, but the committee has also sort of thought outside of the box, and they have been interviewing and communicating with, for example, the police chief to talk about cycling, safe ways to cycle in the city, the rules, the laws, and things like that. And it's being aired on Tacoma Snapshots episodes, We're also going to have 2 more, we're planning this week to have 2 more shoots dealing with ADA issues and missing sidewalks. So the committee does not just focus on the bike routes to the various nodes in the city. They're also looking at ways of educating the community. Those people who don't necessarily cycle, but they still need to be addressed, issues that they may have, issues that the elderly may have, and the youth, or children going back and forth to school. So I just wanted to share that information with you, because when the committee comes back in September, their work plan may be rather broad, but they are doing a lot of things, and they're thinking outside of the box in an effort to provide a safer community for all.
And I'm sorry, I was out of the room for a minute when you opened with your first comment, so I don't know whether you covered this, but my sense was that with the establishment of the, whatever we're calling it, the speed camera fund, that there's going to be money available for pedestrian safety improvements, that there could potentially be a lot of money to put in those particular areas, and it would seem like this committee is the committee that is best positioned to be able to assist the council in deciding the best ways to use that money, and it's significantly more than $10,000.
Well, we'd be
by many times over.
We'd be happy to assist you with that type of thing.
Because that money is a dedicated fund, and it must be used for particular purposes related to road safety.
As you know, Mayor Williams, we have the Tools Design Group, which is another project of mine. They're actually conducting the study for the safe routes to school and the ADA study, 10-year study plan. So I will, once they finish with their information, we'll be coming to you with that as well and sharing that information.
Good. Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. And I thank you for the information on the bike routes, but I especially appreciate your request for guidance from this council. I think that's an important thing for all of our volunteer committees, and I hope this council keeps that in mind so we can come back in September. We can each have lay our ideas on the table and be able to consolidate that into some guidance for the committee for the coming year. I know you've focused a lot on the bike routes, but I think there's a lot of work to be done for safe roadways, pedestrian safety, and many other aspects. So I'm going to be giving it some serious thought as far as what would be the most effective use of the volunteer resource. I think the one thing that I've noticed with volunteer committees is that people don't want to volunteer for a group that doesn't have something interesting and valuable to work on. And so I think it behooves this council to follow your suggestion and come back and give you some tasks to work on. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
Thanks for being here. Thanks, Benita, for all your work in supporting this. You may know that my daughter's an avid bicyclist, and she's come back recently and has introduced me to the Mount Rainier Bike Collective, or Bike Cooperative, and the Riverdale Renaissance Bike Cooperative. And those both have affiliations with their local governments. The Mount Rainier Bike Cooperative has a big chunk of a house and a backyard, and they do outreach to kids and help them become proficient in working on their bikes, put bikes on the road. And I've been really impressed with seeing how they do business. And same with the Riverdale. That one is a different model. The University of Maryland has taken responsibility for an entire elementary school in Riverdale, and they have there's an organic farm area and a bike collective and meeting rooms and so forth. But they do a lot of outreach to kids, and to the extent that you can incorporate some of those ideas and take advantage of the monies that Mayor Williams suggested, I recommend that you talk to some folks down there. I'm glad to give you some names to follow up on if you're interested.
Well, I know PJ Park, who started the Mount Rainier Bike Collective fairly well. I used to live in Mount Rainier with family. I was close to the Park family. It would be great. I think our committee would be very excited about having something like that happen in Tacoma Park. Our committee members, nobody in our committee has kind of come forward, with that kind of volunteer effort. But it would be great to continue to look for somebody who might have that kind of vision. And one thing our committee has done is gotten articles in the newsletter. So maybe we should have an article in the newsletter talking about what is being done in some other communities, and that might inspire somebody to take something up like that in Tacoma Park. With an inspirational, visionary person who can kind of put in that extra effort, I would imagine our city funds and our city recreation department would also, be supportive of that type of thing. And certainly our committee would support the effort. So those are very good ideas.
Great. And I'm going to put a shameless plug in for the Ward 3 bicycle crew this 4th of July parade. This is the last time we'll meet before that. We're bringing from the Riverdale Renaissance Bike Collective a conference bike with 7 seats is going to come up, and Councilmember Wright and I are going to man that with some others and have maybe some other folks riding around with us in the parade. And I think that I know that Kay Daniels Cohen from the SS Carroll is going to have a swarm of bikes of kids. So you're all welcome out there, constituents, and bikes are pretty cool.
Well, thank you for inviting me to join you on the committee bike.
Yes,
I've long wanted to ride that bike, let alone be in the 4th of July parade. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Wright.
Sorry I missed most of the presentation, but I appreciate the maps and I appreciate the service and volunteers that you guys have done on the Safe Road Race Committee. Just 2 thoughts that may one already have been mentioned is that based on speed camera revenue, I think there is going to be increased funds that the city's going to need to look at that have to do with pedestrian safety and roadway safety. So I definitely think it sounds like you're going to come before us again in the fall, maybe for us to give you some more direction. And I'm excited about that, and I'm sure the committee will have many great ideas for the city to think about. The second thing is I wonder if there's people on the committee who have expertise or knowledge about bike shops in the vicinity and if the committee would maybe partner with the Old Town Business Association or the Crossroads Business Association in terms of trying to attract a bicycle store closer into the boundaries of Tacoma Park. Because now I know for a lot of the constituents, they go to other places to get their bikes repaired and that sort of stuff. I know we tried to have one in Old Town before. I don't think it failed because of lack of interest. I think it was more an issue with the landlord. And I do think that there are some properties in Old Town, and I'm sure there's properties in other parts of the city that would probably work well for a bike store, particularly a bike repair place. So I wonder if there might be some synergies between you guys working with the OTBA with your expertise about what are good bike stores that might want to have a satellite location here in Tacoma Park. So, they could exploit the inventory of used bikes they have by not necessarily having them all on site here, but bringing bikes, used bikes when someone in particular is looking for one. I know in the College Park store, they have all their bikes in a database. Many of them used bikes are not even stored at that site. You can go and talk to them, and then they'll bring those bikes to the location. So something would work well like that for a satellite store for them or another bike entity in Tacoma Park.
Yeah, it would. People often mention that it would be great to have a viable bike shop in Tacoma Park. We will put it on our agenda to consult with those business groups and the city's economic development staff. I know from my own experience, which is not real deep into the details of bike shops, but the key thing is having low rent. Bikes take a fair amount of space in a commercial setting, and there's a need to have low rent because you don't make a big margin on each sale. We are kind of in the hole of the donut on bike shops, and I can talk with some of the bike shop owners to kind of see, you know, is it really true we don't have enough people for a market here, or is it really just a market that hasn't been fully accessed? I know there's a brand new bike shop in Hyattsville, and they never had a bike shop in that area for quite a long time. So it would be great. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you for coming, and I appreciate very much the work. As the mayor whispered to me a moment ago that I was an avid biker and hope to be an avid biker again soon, I hope. I had a bike crash about 2 months ago, and I'm still not able to ride yet. I've been thirsting after bikes to buy. I have to buy a new one. But I do have two specific things for the committee. One is I continue to observe bikers in the city who are not obeying the laws. I had my own personal incident with the chief can relate about this, and I stop at every stop sign. But it really is particularly important because it signals to drivers. It's not just a safety issue for the biker, because bikes actually have a lot of visibility, and I think it's more of a message to drivers that bikers are serious, and it signals that they should be respected. I think that's really the reason why you want bikers obeying the law, in addition to it's a safety issue. The second thing I want, I'd love to urge the committee to explore with Public Works what I'll call bike-friendly speed bumps. The speed bumps in Tacoma Park are never going away, and I'm sure we'll be building more of the darn things. And when I'm in a car, it's fine, but on a bike, boy, they can really. And I'm sure someone has come up with a bike-friendly design for speed bumps. And I'd love to, at least as we move forward with new ones, that we try to do something along those lines. And the third thing I want to say is I really applaud the efforts to have more bike paths and routes in Tacoma Park. Tacoma Park has a lot of very narrow and very hilly streets, so it's quite a challenge. Nevertheless, I have observed that in D.C., which now has quite a lot of bike markings of one kind or another, that drivers do pay attention. Not every driver, not all the time, and so on, but they, in general, stay out of the bike lane most of the time. They don't cut you off too often. In other words, I think there is a positive effect for bike markings, either on the pavement or signs and so on. So I really applaud the committee's work on this. Thank you.
And if I can just piggyback real quick on one of your comments, that what always struck me about bicyclists obeying traffic laws, things like stop signs, is that I think it gives drivers the sense that they are sharing the road with a bicycle, because the bicycle is obeying those same traffic laws. If bicyclists don't stop, then it's like, okay, they're not part of the traffic flow. I don't need to pay attention to them as another vehicle. It's more like they're running alongside on the sidewalk like a runner. And I think that whole message makes for much enhanced bicyclist safety. Any other comments?
I'd like to just respond on the speed bump. I live on Westmoreland and have helped get more speed bumps on Westmoreland. Actually, our speed bumps on Westmoreland aren't too bad. my bike route takes me down through the Pinecrest area, and we had some new speed humps put in on 4th. And I will say that for me, going over the speed humps that are also the crosswalks at Cockerell and 4th, I find those are fine.
Those are fine.
But the one that was put in the mid-block between Poplar and Cockerell, that one, the first time I went over it, everything flew out of the back of my bike bag. So I have to, right now I use the gutter pan to traverse those. But we'll look into that. I know Arlington, that's been a big issue over there, and they may have some designs that we can use. Well, thank you all very much. I'm really glad that you all had some things to offer, and I've already got a big agenda to take back to the committee, and we will look into these things and bring a report back to you on what we find out.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next item on our agenda is a resolution regarding the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Preliminary Sector Plan, Prince George's County version. And Alon Blanchard is here. And you have a memo that we got that we probably haven't had a chance to look at. And so if you want to go through what you need to go through and also make sure that you cover your memo, which I'm assuming you were going to.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Alana Blanchard, for the record. I'm on the planning staff at the City of Tacoma Park, and I'm presenting a regular meeting item, a resolution regarding the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Preliminary Sector Plan, which is the draft plan for making recommendations that will change the master plan. Last week, I presented a draft resolution, and since then, I have not received comments regarding making changes, with the exception of from the X-Roads Committee, which is a group of the commercial property owners. And I also received a letter from Bill Hanna, who's I believe he's the chairperson for the Action Langley Park, which is an organization that works for the betterment of the community in the Langley Park area. And I did prepare a response because I know this has been a concern, and I wanted to clarify why we are supporting the plan and recommending the plan with conditions. And so I did walk through some of the housing related recommendations that are contained within the plan, and that from staff's analysis, the recommendations provide more protection than the community would have currently under the existing zoning and regulations. Since the housing currently in the Langley Park area, there are no protections for housing. The housing that is there is market rate, so it's what the owners feel that they can get for the units, and they're charging what they are interested in obtaining for each of the units. And they're under no obligation to maintain the housing at the current rate or at any other rate in the future. So the plan does recommend that certain policies be investigated through a working group, and that working group look at policies such as already exist in Tacoma Park and in the district and in Montgomery County. And the plan also recommends that some additional investment be made by the county to preserve housing or other agencies in the area. And so, which is more than currently exists in the area, and I think compared to what has been considered in the past, a big policy shift for the county. And I'm not sure if what direction the planning board will take with this. I know that it is a big issue for the community, but I do think it represents a big change for the county. So
so from our perspective, there were many recommendations that were made regarding housing in this community. There is a recommendation for rezoning that will upgrade the amount of housing units in that area. So that means that in the future, at some point in time, there may be redevelopment in the area and more houses may be built.
As part of that, is there also inclusion required so that a certain number of units of affordable level would have to be included in those increased units? And if that were to take place, would it, because I guess one of the concerns is you're going to lose affordable housing units, but if you gained more total units and percentage of those were affordable, would the number be the same as the current number of affordable units?
Well, I think there's two things happening here. So there's two recommendations. One recommendation is that the zoning, new zoning applied in the area be written that has inclusionary zoning, which does not exist in Prince George's County. There was a period where it existed, and then I believe it was inclusionary zoning, but I know that they did have some policy, and then there was a sentiment that there was too much affordable housing, and so all that particular affordable housing policy was dropped. They do have Section 8 housing and a housing department, but in terms of preservation of affordable housing, it's separate from zoning code. But the recommendation for the plan is to look at affordable housing, inclusionary zoning, to look at impact fee linkages so that fees for commercial development be used for affordable housing, to look at efficiency apartments. Currently, efficiencies and studio apartments are not allowed to be developed in Prince George's County because they're seen it. I'm not sure why. I won't speculate on that. But so those recommendations are included. And then your other part of the question, I think, is will there be additional housing? There will be more housing under any redevelopment would include additional housing. Now, I'm not sure what the difference is between the two. One of the concerns of the staff that was developing the plan was not to recommend housing types that would be extremely expensive to build. So they are looking at more mid-rise, low to mid-rise types of housing styles, restricting the heights or the density to more affordable construction methods. Does that make sense?
Meaning 4 and 5 story stick construction.
Right, where you would have parking on the inside and then building structure around it.
You may have said this, but I'm not sure I got it. Are you suggesting that that the existing housing will be replaced by more units, a more dense development?
If the property owners choose to redevelop and the county decides to rezone these properties, they will be allowed to build more units than are there currently.
But that would be part of another process, or that would be part of recommendations in the second one?
That would be, the zoning that's recommended allows more units than are currently than are currently allowed. It upzones the number of units that can be allowed to be built on those parcels, on the parcels that are currently multifamily.
I guess, not surprisingly, my concern is for affordable units, and it's extraordinarily difficult to get developers to rebuild in such a way that they're what I would call affordable. So there's, to me, it's a very serious concern that those buildings will be knocked down and replaced by essentially more expensive units. Now, obviously, we don't have any control over it, really, but it's pretty galling. I watched the process in Montgomery County, and there's a lot of lip service to affordable units, but when push comes to shove, there are hardly any, and they use the, percent of the median income. And, the median income is so high in this area that they're not really affordable.
And they do talk about workforce housing, which is,
Right.
which has been adopted recently by Montgomery County, but until recently didn't exist. I mean, I think it certainly is a tough issue all around. Any way it occurs, it's going to need funding, and a revenue source. So, and it's it's a tough issue, I think, for any jurisdiction to deal with.
And I imagine, if I can play devil's advocate for a moment, I would imagine that there are many people in Prince George's County, many elected officials in Prince George's County, who would say, basically, excuse me, we are the affordable housing for the Washington region. And so don't tell us to do even more.
And I don't disagree with that at all.
And I'm not sure that what I heard is anybody saying that they should do more. It's just that as part of the growth in the community, we want to make sure not to exclude people who already live in the community.
Right.
Yeah, that's the concern to me, is that access to good public transportation, like the Purple Line, is one of the most common causes of gentrification, right? So my concern would be that as part of this plan, that and it's all the devil's in the details, right? Inclusionary housing can be very effective, and you could have inclusionary housing that had a one-to-one replacement model for affordable units. And we wouldn't be saying build more affordable housing, we'd just be saying when you build your mixed income, mixed use communities, make sure there's the same number of units of affordable housing. But that comes down to the devil in the detail about whether it's lip service around inclusionary housing or really trying to build a mixed income community.
The community in Langley Park initially was more of a middle income and lower middle income community. So it's fluctuated over time. It hasn't been consistently affordable housing. Although it has been more, I think overall it has been more affordable than some other communities that have been built in both counties. Well,
I think that's true of a lot of communities. The income levels change over time. And I don't, I certainly think that attracting more moderate to high-income residents is going to be beneficial to the area. I think at the same time, we're looking at a new transit facility as being a real helpful feature for the people who currently live in that neighborhood, and it's not going to be very helpful to them if they're forced out because the housing is unaffordable to them. I wonder if the solution to this might be adding a number 7 on our whereas. The now therefore, and I'm not prepared to draft that myself, but I think something saying that we do strongly support the continuation of housing in that area for those in the low-income bracket.
Because we'll need language tonight.
You're always so helpful, Mayor. I thought that you would be helpful in this area, too.
Anybody got any proposed language?
Or we could do it as be it further resolved that the City Council of the City of Tacoma Park strongly encourages the Prince George's County Council to maintain a level of affordable housing that is,
Say commensurate level.
right, commensurate levels. of
That
affordable
the council,
You want to retain every single unit that's currently there as affordable housing?
I think we don't know exactly what units are affordable and what units aren't, but I think if we said commensurate, that suggests that affordable housing would be maintained at a similar level to what exists there now.
So you do want to maintain,
I'm certainly not suggesting that the same percentage of housing be affordable housing or low-income housing as is currently there. I think that's counterproductive for what's envisioned for this plan. I think, though, that on raw numbers, what we're looking at is that there's a hope that as we increase the amount of housing in that area, that the people who live in that area now would not be displaced, and so that that we would have a equal number of affordable units to as what they have now.
so you're looking at preserving the number of units, not the number of people housed, because those are very different,
So the number of units versus what?
versus the number of people, because one of the ways that that area is affordable is through the number of people that are in the units, which is different than the number of units.
Right, and you were saying about there's a vision for building more efficiency apartments,
Right.
and that's different than the types of units that are there now, and so that would change the number of residents, even though not the number of residences. From my perspective, that's maybe a level of detail I'm not prepared to worry about tonight. I think right now that the wording that Councilmember Wright suggested.
I just came up with possible language as number 7, that the language would be look for ways to maintain affordable housing for the current population levels. That gets at not units, but the people who are there. It doesn't say you have to do it in one particular way, but it says maintain affordability for the people who live there.
Yeah, I like the maintain. I don't like your starting out with the word look.
Well, I was looking for a way to get it in the same format. I wasn't happy with look either.
Right, but I think maintain the affordability, the affordable housing for the residents who currently live there.
So it would be maintenance of affordable housing for the current population.
And then you have to define what the current population is. Mayor Williams? I was out of the room. Was there discussion on the proposed number 7? Have we?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay. And was there any feedback from staff or others about the wording in the existing proposed number 7, which talks about conforming and 25% expansion and triggering of new zoning standards, dedications, or public improvements? Did we discuss that part?
Which number 7 are you looking at?
The X Roads commercial property owners proposed changes.
We're looking at the resolution.
We haven't looked at that one yet. We're looking at the resolution.
Okay, but we're talking about the same number.
We're creating a number 7.
Okay, but
We haven't looked at this. We haven't got to that.
Are we intending to?
Yes.
But we're crafting something before we look at it?
Yes.
That seems maybe a little counterproductive if there's anything of value in the proposed number 7.
That would become number 8 and then number 9.
Okay, so we're not.
If we go there.
If we go there. But so the existing proposed number 7 is not being replaced by this number 7 we're working on. We're just creating a new number 7. Thank you very much. Just checking.
So at the moment, a possible number 7 in the resolution would be maintenance of affordable housing for current population levels?
Current population levels.
Current population numbers doesn't do it either.
Are we trying to encourage workforce housing? Which is lower middle class housing? That's what we're trying to get to, isn't it?
Maybe not the most felicitous words, but
Well, shall we?
try to do it tonight.
We have to do it tonight.
We have to do it tonight because there's the 23rd. On the 23rd, there's
Which is tomorrow.
Just tomorrow.
Right. And that hearing, we are required to
Well,
give language?
if you want to have an impact.
Well,
It's an opportunity
if
for us
I'm going to
because
testify
of-
and say, here's our resolution, it's got to be in there. So why don't we say that's placeholder language to be tweaked, and we'll maybe.
So you don't want them to examine or strengthen their language, you want them just to provide it?
We're looking for a way to give them some flexibility on how they do it, but to give them the goal.
To tell them to provide, to maintain the level of housing, to tell the planning board have the council have a policy where they maintain the level of housing, affordable housing.
Maintain the current.
The level of.
Maintain affordable housing for the current population.
For the current population.
Numbers.
Nobody knows what that is.
Right.
It might be easier to do it for the current number of units because that's countable. They can set a benchmark on that, whereas they can't.
But the number of units is tricky because a 3-unit apartment houses many more people than a 1-unit. So you have to say then the number of bedrooms or something like
I
that.
don't know that by the 2010 census.
Maybe. A lot of undocumented folks live there,
No,
right?
but the census, I
I
mean,
don't
the whole
think-
battle, but the census takes into account, they weight things based on.
Well, so
I think we're
it's the
down at the
important
wrong
thing
level of discussion for this.
Maybe so.
Well, all we're trying to decide is whether it's units or people.
It may be better not to be that specific.
Right. A commensurate level of housing, as Councilmember Wright said, and
So what's your language?
Maintain a commensurate level of affordable housing.
Right.
Of affordable housing.
And let them figure out what commensurate is.
Right.
I mean, they're going to do what they want anyway because
Yeah.
we don't have,
Right.
so it expresses our opinion about the importance of affordable housing.
I'm happy with that language.
Good. Me too.
Everybody's happy with it?
Yes.
Okay, good. We have our proposed number 7.
Now we can go to Mr. Robinson's number 7.
Are there any
Extras, number
further
7.
comments? We have proposed changes from the X-Roads property owners, but they can present them. We don't have to.
True.
May I provide a comment?
Yes.
Okay.
So we just need to get through anything with staff and us, and then we'll go to comments.
Got it.
Generally, sector plans do recommend that existing structures, site improvements, and land uses are deemed conforming as long as they're conforming at the time of adoption of the plan. So that's generally not an issue. But we would recommend that the landowners keep an eye throughout the whole process to make sure that that is part of the zoning language when it is adopted. But the second part of it, allowed to be modified, repaired, rebuilt, and expanded up to 25% of existing gross square footage subject to existing zoning requirements without triggering any new zoning standards, dedications, or public improvements is actually much more generous than we would allow in Tacoma Park. In Tacoma Park, a building would only be allowed to expand up to 1,000 square feet without being subject to the commercial revitalization overlay zone. And so I'm not sure if it's fair for the city to recommend a policy somewhere else, which we would, I don't think would want within our city.
Well, are those our rules or park and planning rules in Montgomery County?
In Montgomery County, the Commercial Revitalization Overlay Zone, which is only in East Silver Spring and Tacoma Park, restricts redevelopment of a property. It makes any property that wants to redevelop over 1,000 square feet go through site plan. And must meet the purposes of the zone in order to be approved by the planning board.
And that's an overlay zone that we pushed for in our master plan.
Yes.
Well, I didn't push for it.
We, the city.
It does,
We, the
what
city.
it does is it does protect the vision of the community, because any development is required to be redeveloped in accordance with the vision of the city for each of our commercial districts. I'm not saying that the site plan itself is a fun process to go through.
Right,
But
and effective might be
but
another word that you want to put in there, too.
But the site plan, what it is it was a way for them to rezone without writing out the specific zone standards. It's basically it.
Or giving us the zoning power that we ordinarily would have in the case of 99% of cities in the United States.
Cities that have a larger tax base.
They have a larger what?
That where you want to spend your money on reviewing zones, but yes.
We won't go there.
Just remember that our audience for this is Prince George's County Council and Planning Board. And there are strong sensitivities about people in Montgomery County, particularly in Tacoma Park, telling them what to do. And no, I won't add an and.
Well, this is the X-Roads property owners are on the ground, and this is the expression of what they think would work, apparently, as I read it. It's not, and I hear you saying that, we in Tacoma Park ought not tell Prince George's Planning Department or County Council what to do.
I'm just saying that the message coming from the property owners can be one message. The message coming from us can be interpreted entirely differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have to be careful about that.
I would just like to say that after all this discussion tonight, we focused on some of the things that we would like to see changed or added to our resolution, but I think it's important to say that overall, I'm personally very excited about this plan. I'm happy to see the Prince George's County Council moving forward with this plan, and there are some small things that we've talked about with our resolution that we would like to see a little different with what they're doing, but overall, it's very exciting to see the movement in the direction and the cooperation between the two counties in developing these the plans, overall plans for the area. So I'm supportive of this resolution. I think we're close to finalizing the way it is. I'd like to move the resolution if I can.
We can get to that point. Sure.
I'd like to move it as we've talked about tonight.
Moved it with number 7 added?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Further comments?
I'd like to make a friendly amendment that takes the X-Roads number 3, which I like because right now we focus on the completion of a feasibility study for right turns, and the way they have it written is, I think, doesn't prescribe the potential solution we should look at for traffic improvement at the site before we study it. So it's more broad. It says a feasibility should be done to accommodate traffic movements and volumes, which could include right turns, but there could be other solutions also, prior to the final adoption of the sector plan. So I would be supportive in inserting that language in place of the existing number 3. I think it is more inclusive and retains everything that we're trying to say also.
And I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so we have on the floor the resolution in the packet with the substitution of the language from the X-Roads memo for number 3 and the addition of Councilmember Wright's language for number 7. Any further discussion? Is there public comment?
Mr. Chairman, Erwin Mack, Executive Director, Palmer Land Crossroads. I made the comments that are necessary to be made last week, and I defer to some of the more specifics to Mr. Teague, who will be talking momentarily. I want to make a clarification about something that I may or may not have said last week, and it's that old saw, it isn't what I think I said, it's what you heard me say that makes the difference. And in my enthusiasm for trying to get a single track, if you will, no pun intended, resolution to what street widths there are, it appears that I may have said that the MTA, Maryland Transit Authority, SHA, and the 2 sector plans have never met to talk about anything. And if that came through as what I said, it isn't what I meant to say, and I want to clarify that. The thing that I intended to say, should have said more clearly, is that in spite of meetings that they've had, there is not a single end result of those 3 organizations that property owners can relate to in the width of University Boulevard or New Hampshire Avenue. That's what's disappointing. Secondly, no issue in the 25 years or more that I've been in that crossroads has ever brought the 4 crossroads property owners together in the way that this has. For the first time, the property owners, major ones in Prince George's County, 3 of them, have joined in the property owners on the Tacoma Park side to say this is a far more serious potential harm to us if we don't collectivize our thoughts. And I want to do the proper thing in commending Mr. Teague for having brought together the group we now call the X-Roads, which includes 3 major property owners in Prince George's County who have been involved in the planning of the proposed changes to the Tacoma Park resolution which you're taking. And I hope that you will give that serious thought as Mr. Teague makes his presentation. Thank you.
Council. My name is Neil Teague. I'm the Vice President of the South Teague Company, owner of 7676 New Hampshire Avenue in Crossroads, and also, as Roy Mack just mentioned, chair of the X-Roads Group, which is a group of commercial property owners here. We have not included any of the residential property owners we're discussing earlier in some of the amendments. So our focus is primarily those owners of retail and office buildings, both sides of the county line. Our group has embraced the sector plan process. We have worked closely with both planning staffs, city planning staff, MTA, SHA over the past year. We have high hopes for the vision that this plan is articulating for the future. However, we also have properties and businesses to run in the present. I have owned 7676 for over 21 years this year. So I have seen a lot change, and I have seen a lot not change in 21 years. So we are cognizant, and we also provided some materials early in the letter, that first we must look to maintain existing businesses and the health of those businesses. Ms. Blanchard talked about if we have a bigger tax base, maybe we can do more. We are a big part of the tax base. We would like to see that tax base grow, not shrink. And sometimes in redevelopment situations, you have to go through a very serious trial before you come out the other end. We don't want that to happen in this area. So with that preamble, we have provided, you'll hear from us again, of course, actually Montgomery County, a few comments to your resolution, which we again, Councilmember Stevens, certainly support. most of its visions. We simply think there's an opportunity here to try to retain some flexibility and not have a plan that is so focused on the future, 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, that it constrains the opportunity for property owners to manage and invest in the existing improvements that are there today that are housed very valuable businesses and pay a lot of taxes. We've provided some brief comments. I appreciated that the motion on the floor already includes item number 3, so I won't talk about that further. We are equally concerned about road widths and street widths. There's a lot of differences of opinion here. There's a lot of confusion. We are most concerned that the section plan not have recommended right-of-way expansions that aren't tied to a workable, viable plan for circulation, which again may constrain any development or redevelopment on site, even in the near term, because of potential requirements of right-of-way restoration. So for that reason, we've added, while we support bikers, we've added a real request that not be to the detriment of maintaining right-of-way. Beyond that, we really start to see significant portions of property becoming removed from either service or availability for redevelopment. We also have suggested that it's premature to delete any exploration of parking structures. They're not specifically cited in the plan as parking lot structures. They're simply saying that there may be a need for some kind of public-private parking or parking authority. We don't view the plan's vision as being as stringent as parking right or nothing. We think that this recommendation to delete that is premature at this point in time, and certainly don't plan with ourselves. You've discussed our item number 7, which could be an item number 8. We think, again, it's very important not to inhibit an ability to invest in business or property that may be in its current form for 15 to 20 years. If we had not invested in our office building in 1988, I shudder to think what it would look like today. We've not invested in the shopping center we used to own across the street in 1988. I shudder to think what it would look like today. And it doesn't look that great since we sold it. So it needs some, that there are things that need help. We need to have an opportunity to invest in things now, not simply look to the future. Finally, the plan, as many of these other plans are, is so anti-parking, surface parking. There's general talk in the plan about providing on-street parking during non-rush hours. If I thought that would happen on University or on New Hampshire Avenue, I might be less concerned. But I'm very concerned that a plan that has essentially no on-street parking on the major streets also seems to be prohibiting or suggesting that no surface or convenience parking be made available in a redevelopment. That is very negative for retail. Look at vibrant, urbanized areas. You'll see parking, convenient parking is available in a recent quantity. Not necessarily a huge parking field, but it's there. This plan doesn't provide it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Dubik. I'm with Down Tacoma LLC. We are the local development manager for the 10-acre center at the corner of New Hampshire and University, where it's anchored by Aldi's. And I just really want to amplify what the speakers before me have stated. But I think the biggest issue for us is that it seems that the efforts by Prince George's County and Montgomery County, although both noble and filled with lots of positive ingredients, are premature in their presentation and not at all coordinated. From our understanding, there's been really a lack of intertwining of efforts over the last several months. And what was striking to us was a recent meeting that we had the opportunity to participate in that included the MTA and the SHA. and failure of those organizations collectively to get together to see that there's a concerted effort. I think we all recognize that the Kaepernick event that will enable some future opportunity in this area really is the Purple Line, and SHA and MTA both have gone on a path, and it doesn't appear that either of the municipalities are really taking into great consideration their efforts, and kind of a train has left the station, and these plans do not incorporate those efforts. Without reiterating what was said, I think it's really key to recognize that the Purple Line is not yet funded totally to the best of our knowledge. And put these plans in place will impede short-term rehabilitation of a number of properties that are included. And really, nobody knows with any great certainty what will come in the future with, hopefully, the Purple Line. And in many respects, this plan is very premature. Some of the other fatal flaws in the plan that we see on the Prince County side, as well as on the preview we've had on Montgomery County side, the so-called junk handles. They in no way, shape, or form, in our view, would be meaningful and helpful to the flow of traffic. And in many respects, will impede traffic and will really take away traffic from the front of the shopping centers and push them off into areas that would be deemed secondary streets with some respects behind retail, and really counterbalance what we think is good retail planning and good urban planning. We support the notion of redevelopment, and think over time that there's a lot of good in plans, so we want to make sure that comes across, but I think it's really critical that everybody, from our standpoint, from the ownership of the property, recognizes that there's tremendous danger in the fact that these plans are coming to do it at this time without concerted effort, real consideration, and coordination.
Do you have a question?
I have a question. I guess it's more for staff. This issue around parking, right? So we're just recommending getting rid of a parking ride, and there's...
There are actually several parking options that are presented in the Prince George's County plan, but including surface parking, all it says is that if you redevelop your property, they do recommend that most of the parking be beside or behind the building and not in front of it. So that's a very different development pattern, which is very car-oriented currently, and the recommendation for all future development is to be pedestrian-oriented, which includes parking to the side or behind the building, not in front of it. So that is a big shift. It is something certainly that we've been advocating for in Tacoma Park, and buildings that have been built recently in Tacoma Park, such as the Easy Storage and Dan's building, have, Mr. Jordan, I'm going to call you Mr. Robinson or Dan, but Dan's building both have parking on the side of the building and not in front of the building. And that's certainly been the trend in the Washington region, so we don't think that was unreasonable. The park and ride, there are multiple references to parking. So, for example, there's a recommendation that parking be structured, that there be private-public partnerships to develop parking, but there are also two references, one to park and ride lots throughout the area to serve commuters, and one for park and ride structures be built in the area. And that's because that had never been part of the planning for the Purple Line. The Purple Line was always seen as an urban station. It wasn't a suburban station where people would drive in and park, similar to the lot in Old Town, not in Old Town, but in Old Tacoma, which is it's not a commuter parking lot. It's really just an errand parking lot.
Thanks for clarifying that. It makes sense to me. It sounds, on the parking side, like we're trying to develop in a way that's similar to Silver Spring in the sense that it creates more of an urban and walkable, pedestrian-friendly community.
Let me just clarify that we were taking public comment. Was there somebody else who wanted to testify? Then we'll go to more questions unless there was a particular question for a speaker.
Good evening. My name is Bob Wolf. I work for the Saul Company, Saul Centers, Inc. We're the owners of the Hampshire Langley Center, which is in Tacoma Park on the south side of University. It's the Safeway anchored center that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. We broadly agree with what you folks are trying to achieve. I think the vision, you're going to find that if we present plans, because this moves forward, you're going to like our plans. We want a mixed-use project. If we were ever to redevelop the 10-acre parcel, we want it to be mixed-use. We want first-floor retail. We want active streets. We would subdivide the 10 acres into very nice retail-activated, pedestrian-friendly streets. We want what you want. I think that's not the problem. The problem is that this plan may not let us do that, number one, and it may not let us operate the center until we get to the future that we both want. And I want to illustrate exactly what that means. The first problem is the 150-foot right-of-way that this plan, the Prince George's plan, as well as the Montgomery plan proposes. That right-of-way will take out our Wachovia bank pad and 3 trays of parking. That will mean you bought the center, but not you personally, but the jurisdiction that tries to get eminent domain will buy our center. You can't afford that. That's a silly thing to do. It doesn't make sense. Why would you do it? Well, they do it because they want 22 feet of sidewalk. That's also silly. The 22 feet of sidewalk is designed to be pedestrian friendly. University Avenue is 7 lanes for cars and 2 tracks. It'll never be pedestrian friendly. And we can't get a retailer that would want to be on that street. So you're wasting your money and you're building sidewalks that will never be used. It doesn't make sense. We are very much against the 150-foot right-of-way. Now, how did that happen? I think part of it is that they don't understand what MTA is proposing. If you look on page 37 of the PG plan, you'll see that they don't include the transitway stop. They just include the tracks, but there's no station. That adds 18 feet. They also don't understand that they assume that the right-of-way will be equally distributed from the center line of University. That is not going to happen because the bus transit station will go first. And MTA is on record as saying they will hold that line. So a disproportionate share of that 150 feet will go on the Saul property. The end result is it really makes it impossible for us to continue to operate that property. So we very strongly urge that you bring that issue up to Prince George's County. That's number one. Number two, this is tough.
We got to fix that.
It's getting replaced.
We need a penny or something. Number two is the jug handle. I don't propose to know whether it's a good idea from a transportation point of view or not, and that hopefully that will be determined. But what it does do is it takes what I think is the jewel of the redevelopment potential. That is, we have a 10-acre site that borders both on New Hampshire and University, adjacent to the future Purple Line station. You couldn't ask for a better redevelopment opportunity. The jug handle plan puts a massive public street right through our property. When you're creating mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly, retail-activated streets, they're very fragile. You need to create them with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. This essentially runs a street through us with a jackhammer. It will not work. It will impede the redevelopment because it'll be designed by traffic engineers somewhere in a building that you and I will never talk to. It's a bad idea from an urban planning point of view. We would urge that they find another way to deal with the traffic if, in fact, that's a problem. Yes? Was there a question I need to answer? Okay. So that's basically the 2 points I wanted to make. I hope you'll take those forward and alert Prince George's County that one of the primary redevelopment opportunities in Montgomery, Tacoma Park is going to be degraded by their plan. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just a reminder that we have been informed with legal accuracy that all of University Boulevard from Merrimack heading into Prince George's County is in Prince George's County. So what we once thought was a portion of that street was part of Tacoma Park is not. We don't even know where the city line is by city administration admission. So when we're talking about what Prince George's County is going to do, it's up against the city's line, but the county line is clear. It includes the sidewalk in front of their property, and as it wraps around on New Hampshire, in front of the 7676 building, all in Prince George's County.
Say that last part again, please. It sounded like you were saying the sidewalk going down New Hampshire towards 7676.
By the sign, it stops by the sign as it starts to wrap around. It's University Boulevard where New Hampshire comes to it. So from Merrimack on, everything on University Boulevard is in Prince George's County all the way down to my favorite eating place, Lido's. And the sector plan goes as far as the utility lines. So all of University Boulevard is going to be affected because from the Merrimack on, I repeat, eastward is in Prince George's County.
So the line is very close in front of that curved welcome sign that
Yes,
the city put in.
it is. That is the line. That's the county line. All the way across the 7-Eleven on down. These properties are all affected by University Boulevard being in Prince George's County.
Similar to Eastern Avenue.
Yes.
Being all in the district,
Yes.
including the sidewalk in front of the
Yes.
rental properties.
Yes, as it is over here in Old Town. Correct.
Does staff have any comments you want to make?
I appreciate the uncertainty that the property owners have been in. I think it's been a long process, and getting everyone in the same room, especially all of the staff and all the property owners together, can be difficult. And then getting through, generally, there's a long laundry list of items. My understanding, both from talking to staff at Park and Planning and from looking at the resulting draft from the sector plan, is that both of the properties in Tacoma Park, where there are concerns about the right proposal for study, that both of those, due to the requests of the representatives of the properties, both of those have been rerouted to around, and anything that's seen inside the property, with the exception of the extension from Holton Lane to University Boulevard, are private streets that would be for local traffic only, where the extension between Holton Lane and University Boulevard does angle into the property slightly, and that's for both queuing and I believe topo. I'm not sure. You'd have to talk to the traffic engineer, and I can find that out. But while it is a big change, the staff did respond to the property owners, and apparently they haven't done it in writing, but did make those changes based on their concerns.
Anything else?
Do you want to talk about the right-of-way?
Is your understanding any different from what Mr. Mack just stated?
I think there's a lot of issues related to the right-of-way. One of them is that especially as affects the Saul property, the transit center is a fixed object. So University Boulevard, in order to include the Purple Line and any pedestrian accommodations, can only expand to the south towards Tacoma Park. And that's one of the reasons that we are very interested in eliminating the left turns, because at that location there are 2 left turns. So there are 2 additional lanes. There's also, so there'll be the addition of 2 tracks and a platform at that location, which will all be in the direction of Tacoma Park, because the transit station is at the minimal acceptable widths for bus lanes, parking areas, sidewalks, et cetera. I do know that the park and planning staff has been thinking about the zoning and so forth, so that when land is dedicated, that it will retain the developable, the square footage, because that's very important. When you redevelop a property, your density is based on your overall square footage. So they are looking at how, at retaining the total square footage prior to dedication in any calculations.
And this is just a kind of a quick aside on the transit center. Is the current proposal for the transit center more extensive than what I remember from the original proposal for a transit center when it was on the other side of University Boulevard on the Salt property?
It's essentially...
I'm just wondering whether it changed substantially from what was proposed over there.
That was, I've never seen the design for the proposal for the Salt.
And I asked that only because I was tempted to say something like, well, gee, the transit center's over on the other side. If it had been on this side, the concern might not be there because they might have to take the right of way the other way.
Mr. Mayor, I can speak from that perspective. There's no comparison between the size of the present plan on the Taco Bell site, much bigger. It's 1 acre in size to accommodate 61 buses at peak hour, 3,500 riders, whereas the earlier one that was proposed for the BF Salt property next to the Safeway was a much smaller one only for the ride-on. Okay. It had nothing to do with the other lines. This accommodates all the buses. And when it comes to this right-of-way, I just bring you a simple illustration. Elsewhere on Holton Lane, it's 60 feet wide now, brick to brick, post office to the other side of the street. The proposed sector plan says make it 70 feet wide. Where does that come from? Somebody's buildings are going to have to be torn down to accommodate that extra 10 feet because it isn't there. There's building to building right now is 60 feet. This is the kind of thing that perplexes us as we're looking at how to bring in revitalization, which everyone knows needs to come in. It's how to do it with the least amount of harm.
Okay. Thanks. Councilman Robinson.
This may be out of left field, but has anyone brought up a traffic circle in that intersection?
It was immediately discarded by State Highway because it was similar to DuPont Circle, where you have lanes that go under the intersection, and the cost for maintaining stormwater in an underpass was seen as too expensive.
And it goes under because of you need the underneath to get around?
Because of the quantity of vehicles.
Okay.
You could have a roundabout. Frankly, I don't like driving in roundabouts. But I'm sure other people do, and
well, it's a way to accommodate people who need to turn at any left,
right.
Any left turn or what have you, or right-hand turn. So that was one question. Another was, I think I want to take issue, I'm not a traffic planner, but this sense that Old Tacoma is like New Hampshire and University Boulevard. That strikes me as being baloney.
I didn't say that. I don't mean that it's like Old Tacoma, but the type of user that's envisioned. Meaning that the transit serves the local population. It doesn't draw people in from outside of the community to use the station.
Well, I'm not sure. Perhaps that's true, but I do know that far more people come to the Crossroads to shop and to be there and arrive there by car. I mean, it's 2 orders of magnitude
right.
higher than Tacoma Park.
Absolutely, but a park and ride is a specific facility for people to not to shop in the area, but to commute via the transit system. So, for example, along this transit line, they might be commuting to Bethesda or to New Carrollton, but parking in Tacoma Langley. because that's where they could find parking. Or they might be transferring to the Red Line and going downtown,
Okay,
because
so-
the parking would be less expensive here.
So
they
the
would-
decision, let me just back up, the decision to not have this be a park and ride is based on what?
The interest is in developing parking for shopping and for residents in the area, not for people who are driving in from outside of the community just to get on the metro.
Okay, and that has buy-in from appropriate folks. Okay, thank you.
In the interest of getting closure tonight on this, I'd like to make a proposal that, given the additional recommendations from the X-Roads group, I would say that working in reverse order, at the since we've already included their language in number 3, it would seem that the additional items that we would need to decide on, I would say that I don't particularly want to get into the language in their proposed number 7, given the previous discussion about kind of what we have with the commercial revitalization overlay zone. I think leaving number 4 in is reasonable, because I think that it just says that we want to eliminate the park and ride lots. It doesn't, or structures, it doesn't talk about the other parking issues, which I think are important, but I think bringing the park and ride lots in would bring a lot of traffic into the area, and we don't want to see them do that. And the number 2, the additional language strikes me as making a recommendation to add something into the mix, but then shrink the total area, and that seems kind of contradictory, like, you know, put another potato in the sack, but use a smaller sack. I think that it is good to include the recommendation for the buffered bike lane, and to let both Prince George's and Montgomery deal with the width that's needed to do this. It's all going to have to fit. There's going to be difficulties that property owners talked about in terms of that impact, and I think, frankly, that's a county issue, and I think they're going to have to deal with it.
Bruce, can I make one clarification, a short clarifying question? Erwin, I saw your head nod when I think it was in agreement that that the X-Roads does not want this to be a park and ride kind of location. That's a head nod. And your recommended language under 4, it says delete. Does that delete mean you agree with number 4, delete park and ride, or does it mean delete the delete sentence?
It means we think it's premature, to take that off the table. We agree, we don't want to turn this into a commuter depot. But I think that if you were going to do a public-private parking structure, park and ride may be part of the mix. In fact, if there are going to be people who are going to be coming to the city, they're going to park in retail spaces if there are no other spaces. So we're just saying, I think it's premature. So I was saying, take it off the table as a recommendation to leave it now.
You also mentioned having a parking authority.
Yes.
And is that something that you would encourage having?
Certainly. I think.
Does it make sense for us to have, as opposed to saying delete park and ride, does it make sense for us to say include the notion of a parking authority?
That's actually already in the sector plan.
Okay, if it's already in the sector plan, then maybe that addresses.
Our concern was simply to take it off the table is I think, premature, and that's our worst consensus. Certainly, as Lance mentioned, we will be there tomorrow night too, so we'll have our own opportunity to make our own voice set. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
My sense is, given that explanation, that we might want to consider deleting number 4.
Mr. Mayor, on number 3 in this suggestion,
I failed to mention a cooperative venture between the city of Tacoma Park and our CDA that we're still mulling over. Ilana Blanchard suggested that there was a possibility of a $25,000 grant made available for this traffic study, this feasibility study, which has never been made. And we're trying to work through to see if we, between us, can cooperatively write such a thing with the CDA being the sponsoring organization. And I admit my own incapability and inadequacy to write a grant, so we went back to Ms. Gaines and to Ms. Blanchard to see if we can do this as a team of some way. But no real study has ever been made, and the great numbers of huge sums of money, including $1 million, was thrown about between SHA and Prince George's County as being available to do this, has never been done. So fortunately, Ms. Blanchard discovered the possibility that we might be able to get $25,000 for it. That's why we express our concern, since there hasn't been a feasibility study.
Park and Planning did do a feasibility study, but it was preliminary and didn't include current counts, and then there was also some finer detail that would be needed for a full, study that could be turned into an engineered plan. But in terms of whether it was feasible or not, there has been an initial study.
Okay, so I'll reiterate my proposal for the resolution language, which is on the points for the therefores, that we retain number 1, we retain number 2, we substitute the X-Roads language for number 3, we delete number 4, we retain number 5, we retain 6, and we add Councilmember Wright's language for number 7.
And what about number 8?
I did not have a number 8.
The X-Roads one.
Well, I felt like
I don't think
by deleting number 4
and encouraging a parking
it's on the
authority.
table.
Yeah, I would say so too.
And the sector plan doesn't suggest the removal. It just says that if you redevelop, it still allows surface parking. It doesn't say you can't. But for the density that properties would be allowed to redevelop at, they would not be able to, they may not be able to entirely park at surface if they desire to develop to the full potential of their site.
Just so I can get comfortable agreeing with your number 2 proposal. Does the sector plan say anything about how that road would be used? Because I do agree that it is a little bit counterintuitive to say you want as wide a road in the right-of-way, continue to have same number of lanes, and at the same time want it to be pedestrian-friendly. But if they're saying that they want the right-of-way to do something like we're proposing on New Hampshire Avenue in our concept plan further down, where you might create a local traffic road, a bike lane,
Right.
A bunch of different things, as opposed to just train and 4 lanes of traffic.
Yeah.
Does it say anything about how they would use that?
Yeah.
On the bike lane idea, do they talk about?
Yes, so they're suggesting a 2-foot buffer, a 6-foot bike lane, a 5-foot tree buffer, and then 15 feet to the build 2 line for buildings. So that, for example, in Old Town, the sidewalk in front of the post office is about 14 feet wide. That's the sidewalk and the tree lane. That's a very small building. We're expecting these buildings to be larger. I'm not saying that the Montgomery County is exactly 15 feet. I think they might be 12 feet, but in that range. So this would be more like the sidewalk in front of the SunTrust.
But then they're also talking about bike lane, tree buffer. Right? So
bike lane buffer.
That explains it.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Susie Ludlow is monitoring the discussion. And she sent an email that there has not been an absolute determination of exactly where the county line is along University Boulevard. A survey project is needed to determine that.
That's my understanding.
So then we should add that as a recommendation, as a number 8.
Would be pretty handy to.
That a survey be done to determine that.
I don't think anyone's actually claiming University Boulevard as part of this plan. But
say that again?
I'm not sure that anyone is claiming University Boulevard as part of this plan. I think both counties are.
Saying, here, you have it.
No, actually, I think Montgomery County is very happy to let Prince George's County make the determination. But,
Mr. Mayor, can I make one on parking? Nobody's suggesting we want open parking fields in this kind of area, but I am concerned, there was just a discussion about the right-of-way. There's no on-street parking in any of those widths, so let's assume it's not there. I think a vibrant retail area is going to have some convenient surface parking. If it's not on the street, it needs to be on the property. We're not suggesting that all of the parking to support a higher density to be on in surface, not at all. But we are suggesting that somehow, if it's not going to be on the street, and I don't think it will be on University or New Hampshire, based on the plans I've seen, that there be an opportunity to retain some of that in a site plan format. And the way I read this plan, Ms. Blanchard says it's not prohibited. It's not prohibited, but I know how planners are. When it says it's going to be on the side or the back, they're going to be absolutely stringent about keeping it away from the very retail businesses they want to support. It just doesn't work. And I think you see areas which have limited parking access, the retailers have problems. So that's simply why, that's the intent of our item number 8. I know you've been changing the numbers around.
Is it like Ellsworth and Silver Spring, where you have to park in a lot and then walk down, and then finally you get to Ellsworth?
That's one model, but if you think about Old Town, you have on-street parking in most locations. Some locations you don't, but generally you still have to walk to where you're going. I think the most desirable outcome is that over time State Highway will allow on-street parking to be located along University and New Hampshire Avenue. But in lieu of that, there probably would more likely be parking beside a building or behind a building. And I think it becomes the developer's choice when they redevelop where that's located, except for in front of the building. Generally, it's not supported except for in locations that haven't been rezoned.
It's kind of hard to conceive of on-street parking along University in New Hampshire because there's so much traffic there.
And part of that is because we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years.
Right.
We don't know what transportation patterns will be like then.
And the CVS that we have in Old Town is like a good example of the reverse, right? It's like the wrong thing to have parking in the front there. Parking should be behind, and the property should be up near the curb line to be pedestrian friendly.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So that's sort of what, now here we have a very suburban setup. All the parking's in the front, you pull in, park and walk over to it. It's suggesting much more of a situation where you would probably park one place, come out and walk to a variety of different stores. There'd be a lot more foot traffic, there's greater housing density, blah, blah, blah. So I'm supportive of the parking not being in front of the properties, although you can have it other places behind or in garages.
So, are we ready to vote on the amended resolution that includes number 1, includes number 2, has the substitute language for number 3, deletes number 4, retains number 5, retains number 6, and has Councilmember Wright's language for number 7? And this is a resolution. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? All, it's unanimous in favor. Thank you all. We will take a short break. and then we will come back and zip through the rest of the meeting. And the next one up is agenda item number 5, which is a second reading of ordinance adopting the FY10 pay scale for staff who are covered by the AFSCME collective bargaining agreement. Would somebody like to move the ordinance?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Robinson. Is there any discussion? Is there any public comment? It's a second reading ordinance. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Next item is number 6, second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2010 pay scale for staff who are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement. Would somebody like to move the ordinance?
Move. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Snipper, seconded by Councilmember Wright. Is there any discussion? Is there any public comment? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Next item is number 7, second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2010 pay scale for police officers. Would somebody like to move the ordinance?
Move. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Is there any comment? Is there any public comment? The clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next item is number 8, second reading ordinance making technical amendments to Tacoma Park Code Title III Ethics.
Moved. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, second by Councilmember Snipper. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
I read through this and I think I understand it, and I think about it in relation to some of the activities that I do in the city, especially working with some of the nonprofit organizations. And I believe this, safeguards the interests of the taxpayers, and at the same time provides some flexibility so council members can actually do things and participate in activities in the city. But I think it's helpful for council members to be able to get opinions rather than just waiting for someone to say there's a violation. So I'd like to make sure that the Ethics Commission is able to offer opinions to council members when asked, so that we can check to make sure that we're not in violation. Because I certainly don't consider myself qualified to understand all the nuances of the legal language such as is in this ordinance. I try to understand it as we're approving it, but there are little things that I know lawyers read into things that I don't always maybe interpret the right way. So is that a function of the Ethics Commission, is to provide opinions to council members?
I believe so.
I'm going to look to the city clerk, but I believe that's specifically stated as part of their charge in the ordinance. Is that correct?
And is there a time frame associated with that? Like how quickly they need to provide something? I don't think there is.
There is not, but it might make sense to, the Ethics Commission, some members are due for reappointment in September. It might be appropriate to have the commission come, and that could be something, a point of discussion with the commission.
Because I can imagine that there would be situations where somebody might ask for an opinion, and if you don't get it for 3 months, it's too late.
Yeah, or you end up in violation because you have to continue with your activities. I mean, certainly not.
You can also get an opinion from the city attorney, though, if it's needed rapidly to make sure you're legally complying. I mean, that's what happened. That's what I did.
Okay, I thank you.
Okay. Any other council comment? Any public comment? Will the clerk please call the roll for the second reading ordinance?
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snipper.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Next item is number 9, second reading ordinance authorizing FY09 budget amendment number 4. Is there any comment on this?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Robinson, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, second reading ordinance, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snipper.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Next item is number 10, resolution approving 2009 amendments to the Tacoma Park Affordable Housing Policy and Plan. Somebody like to
Move the ordinance. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Snipper, seconded by Councilmember Wright. Councilmember Siemens.
Yes, I'm just curious, as we look at this, I know, this was first passed in 2002. In this last year, we have spent a lot of time on the strategic plan, and I'm just curious how well this conforms to the strategic plan that we put in place.
I look to Ms. Walker, who's in the audience. I don't believe there's any conflicts. I think it is in conformance, but...
Yeah, the plan, we've made every attempt to include in the plan goals that would adhere to the goals of the council, sustainability and livability goals. And so we've incorporated home ownership opportunities, rental housing opportunities. And so, both Sarah and I have looked to the strategic plan for the council when it was recently passed, and we felt that many of the goals that we have here do tie in with the goals from the council. Did you have any particular questions about it?
I just think as since we do have the strategic plan in place now, it would be helpful to have these other plans that we have done in various city departments kind of fall under the umbrella of that overall strategic plan. And I'm hopeful that as we move forward through the years, and it's not something that happens overnight, that the these kind of sub-plans are tailored so that it's clear how they fit into the overall strategic plan.
Right. Well, in terms of
something that we've done recently in the last week. We put in 2 applications to the Community Legacy Program, and we felt that that really ties in with the council's interest in keeping energy efficiency on the, like
Right.
a lot of the construction, 7610 Maple Avenue that MHP is doing, and then the Aspen Court project, the 3 properties there. We hope to tie in a grant proposal with those projects. So we feel that, the livability, sustainability
Right.
goals, do tie in with that.
I appreciate that, and I didn't mean to be critical that you weren't following the strategic plan, but I think these other plans need to kind of be folded in so that it's clear which parts of these plans do, supplement or support the strategic plan overall, and which pieces then maybe, don't fall under the goals as set in the strategic plan, and maybe things that we could de-emphasize.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
Well, I'm very supportive of, I think, probably all of the programs in here. I would have to vote against this action plan as written, specifically because it doesn't provide something that I've asked for on a number of occasions, and I know Councilmember Clay has asked for, and I'm not sure everyone else stands on this, but I don't feel like it provides a full accounting of what we spend on affordable housing. In particular, I think it doesn't tell us what the cost of the true total estimate of the cost of rent stabilization. And I think that since that's the biggest way we provide affordable housing, probably the most costly of all the programs that we provide, and I realize it takes some assumptions and a bit of tricky calculations probably to get there, and a bunch of that funding is the result of lower tax revenue. I think it's critically important we have that, because I think as part of the case that we would make to the county around what we're providing, we should be able to go to them and say, we are spending all this money on affordable housing. If you look at the statistics on where affordable housing exists in the county, Tacoma Park is providing a disproportionate amount compared to the rest of the county. We're proud of that and happy about that. But the county should compensate us for that, because it's a service we're providing. And I can't make that argument, and I feel, because I don't have the numbers, and I feel uncomfortable voting for an action plan. If it was just policy, I might be okay, but since it's called an action plan, I think one of the actions should be that we have a full accounting of affordable housing programs in the city.
The staff has talked about this quite a bit internally, and I think if that's the direction that the council would like to go, we would likely need some technical resources. I don't think there's anyone in my office or on the housing staff who feels that we have the knowledge basically to do those calculations. So that may just be something the council wishes to talk about at some future date, whether you'd like to go in that direction.
I thought that's what was in the strategic plan, that this would be something for a future discussion of how to do it, when to do it, and of course funding for it. I don't remember that it was in this year's thing.
Councilmember Siemens' point, I guess, then why wouldn't it be in here? And I maybe I'm reading this wrong, but the last time we adopted something was in 2002. So I think that stood from 2002 to 2009. Just because we're adopting this in 2009, I'm not taking this as the plan just for 2009, you know what I mean? So I would be comfortable saying that at some future date, we are going to do that accounting as part of this action plan, as long as it's in here.
I think there
and I realize it probably can't be done this year because we didn't put money in the budget for technical assistance. But maybe we would say that we would do it at a particular date in the future, and then we could put money in the budget in next year or the year after. That would be my.
I think we should have a broader discussion of how to implement the strategic plan. There's a whole bunch of things in there. There's calls for all kinds of, 5-year plans and so on in it. I understand that this is sort of the first one that's come up.
And I think this has come up more frequently than just 2002.
Oh, yeah, this particular issue, yeah.
I think the plan and the programs that are currently in here were based on the current funding that we have for affordable housing. And so that's why it doesn't include that aspect of, the research that you're talking about. I think we came before the council in 2006 with a revision of the 2002 plan, and there was an adoption of the 2006 affordable housing plan. So it's not like it went from 2002 to 2009, but
No, I hear that, but my point is still,
Yes,
because it
yeah.
went from 2002 to 2006 versus 2006 to 2009. I'm just saying that just because it says 2009 on it doesn't mean that it's a plan just for this year.
No,
Right.
correct.
And I guess I understand Councilmember Sniffer's point, but we adopted the strategic plan for a reason. It's only a 5-year strategic plan. There's no time to start like the current in terms of when these things come before us, sort of mini, more detailed plans for an area we've commented on in the strategic plan, that it should be consistent to Councilmember Siemens, and that's the biggest area that I see the inconsistency in. I won't belabor the point if my fellow council members feel like that's not something they want to put in here. I respect that. I don't conscious feel like I can vote for it.
If I can suggest, I've been going back and forth on whether it should be a whereas or a therefore, but I'll try it as a whereas. And some language like, whereas the City Council adopted a strategic plan that included the goal of understanding the true cost of affordable housing in the city, and wants to undertake that at a future date when funding is available. It will help present a true picture of the total cost of affordable housing in the city. At least we've got it in here in the policy. It integrates it and says we need to do it in the future. It's not in here now, but at least it's part of this document. Would that do it?
Yeah, I mean, is it reasonable to say that we would postpone this until the next council meeting? We'd have language, because wouldn't they also need to put into the action plan something saying that they were going to, or because it's saying therefore be resolved, you'd adopt this plan, and then it wouldn't be mentioned at all in the action plan. So it seems like logical that in the action plan there would be some piece that was around.
I was hearing that this action plan incorporates items for which there are funding in the current fiscal year.
Right.
So it's the 2009 plan. So it seems like if we don't have the money in the budget for that additional piece, it would be hard to include it in the 2009 plan.
Seems like should be rightly then the FY10 plan.
Yeah, so it does say to be evaluated on an annual basis.
Yes.
So if it's actually evaluated on an annual basis, I'm okay with that language, yes.
Yeah.
We add that whereas.
Okay. Did the city clerk get enough of that language? I'm not sure I could repeat it.
I got it. Whereas the city council adopted a strategic plan that included a goal of understanding the true cost of affordable housing in the city, and wants to undertake that study at a future date when funding is available.
I think the strategic plan talks about cost effectiveness, not the true cost of it, and that would include both the costs and the benefits.
Okay. Councilmember Robinson.
I'm feeling a little lost here, I think. It's probably because I just don't understand all the efforts that we do for affordable housing, and I'm learning as I go along, as I go along. This is an amended list of the efforts that we do, if I read this right, and it's amended based on the comments you got from us not too long ago after the first time you brought this plan to us. Do I have that right?
It's pretty much the same information that we presented to you, you know, on the 16th, I think that was.
16th of May, was it?
Yeah. And
So a month or so ago.
right.
Maybe that's the trouble. A month up here, a month seems like a long time ago. But so you brought this to us. We made some comments. You made some amendments.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing which ones those are, where those are. So I'm a little disoriented in that regard.
Well, there weren't any changes proposed
No changes.
to the programming, so everything in here is the same.
Okay, so it says with amendments.
Well, what we did change was the policy statement. There were some comments about the policy statement, and so we incorporated those changes. It's listed on page 1. And that essentially was the only change. We've eliminated, you know, some of the information that we thought could be taken out, and we consolidated all the programming.
Okay, and was the going back the month? Was a comment made about the staff costs? Because I see that there are a number of costs for many of these items, and those are kind of hard costs, not including staff. If I've got that right. So I'm wondering, is this for your benefit as well as ours, so that you put in on paper how many folks were served and at what cost? I think I'm just a little lost here. Why am I seeing the $120 and the $11 per application and the the $115 per workshop? I'm a little unclear on why we're at that level of detail in this document.
Because I guess that's what we thought you were interested in.
Okay.
In terms of, you know, the effectiveness for various programs, like how many people are participating in the programs and what that turns out to be cost per person, or, you know, so that's why we included it.
And I can see that. The lack of staff costs mystifies me a little bit, because when I'm thinking of how much is our budget, and I know this all fits into the affordable housing budget, but if I tallied all these things up, it would be, I'm sure, a very small component of that budget, because the staff cost would be the other 90% or 95%.
Right.
So I think maybe that's why I'm having trouble with the financial aspect of it, is that it doesn't, from an accounting point of view, it doesn't add up to anything for me, except for me to know that it costs $11 to provide this service or $1,000 to provide that service. I don't know if you can see where I'm coming from, but I'm a little at sea looking at this.
Well, I understand, but during the last discussion, I don't think there was any discussion about staff costs. We were just talking about programming costs. And so, you know, we just incorporated all the programming costs into the plan, not the staff costs.
Okay. Well,
I mean, if you want the staff costs, we can, you know,
do
modify this.
Do you keep it with staff costs? I mean, did you not put the staff costs in, but you know what the staff costs are, or do you not analyze?
I don't know offhand what they are.
Well, do you have in your accounting system?
Oh, yes.
You have that. So
yes.
So you could come back with this, and we would know what the full cost of each of these was.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if we're going to reconsider this, I guess I would request that.
Okay.
One of the issues that I've talked about frequently is what I call performance-based budgeting, a kind of standard way to do this. And it did make it into the strategic plan that each department would start doing that for some function or activity. What Councilmember Robinson is suggesting is quite a lot of them. And so I'm asking a clarifying question. Are you going to do what I would call a performance-based budgeting, which is a fairly standard tool for each of the programs listed? Or are you, I mean, what are we actually asking for and what are we actually getting, I suppose? I don't want you to do too much work, and I do want to satisfy Councilmember Robinson. But if you were to say you have it in your hip pocket, you just don't have it in here, and you could go back to your office and spend a few hours doing it, that's one thing. If, on the other hand, it's going to take a lot of staff time to do all of the programs, then it seems to me it might be worth just picking and choosing.
Well, I'm not sure what your question is.
The question is how much staff time it will take to produce what Councilmember Robinson has asked for.
I don't think very much time, you know,
okay.
in terms of, you know, putting that together. You know, I can speak to Sarah about it, and, you know, we can get back to you on it. But I would imagine that, you know, we can, you know, get that figure and incorporate it in here pretty easily.
Great. That'd be great.
Any other questions? So we have a friendly amendment,
yes,
which added language as a whereas. We're ready to go forward and adopt this, and that language references coming back to getting some additional information and incorporating in this as a future item. Is there any public comment? All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item is agenda item number 11, a resolution authorizing submission of Maryland Municipal League legislative action requests. And the Deputy City Manager is here, and I believe we have some additional language, additional items. We have additions and deletions from the item that was in the packet.
Good evening. Based on the emails this late afternoon that I received, I did pull together a little bit of additional information and an alternative, some alternative language for a draft resolution that might make things work a little bit easier. I just kind of took that on myself. The first item that I've passed out is House Bill 1210. And given the title of the House bill, which from last year, Chesapeake Bay Restoration Consumer Retail Choice Act of 2009, I did not identify it when I was going through my search as the bag bill that Delegate Alcar put in. But fortunately, Mayor Williams contacted him and found the number so that I could get the language. The information on that relates to legislative action request that you discussed several weeks ago, which would basically encourage a bag bill similar to that was just passed by Washington, D.C. And the goal would be to encourage reusable bags in retail shopping centers and have a charge for non-reusable bags, kind of flimsy plastic bags in particular, with some of the funds going to the store and some of the funds, in this case, going to Chesapeake Bay restoration activities. The Delegate Carr had encouraged a submission through the legislative action request process, which was well received in our discussions a couple weeks ago. And so I prepared a legislative action request form. I would admit, I would, if you wish to go forward with that, amend it and cite House Bill 1210 as part of that legislative action request as an example of the information. The other item that was suggested, that I remember being suggested as a legislative action request, was one to encourage the kind of activities that would happen in Broward County, Florida, which looked at getting rid of kind of unincorporated land in a county and dividing it up into municipalities so that there was a more clear delineation. And Councilman Robinson, if I say anything incorrect or miss a point somewhere, let me know. But a more clear delineation of what roles, specific roles, a county should fund versus municipalities, and allow the local jurisdictions, local municipalities to better identify the needs that they particularly have and the funds for that. This would help address some of the inequities that we've found related to municipal tax duplication in Maryland. Maryland is somewhat unusual from other states in that it really doesn't have very many municipalities, or certainly many larger municipalities. And so the state's kind of gotten in a tradition of just thinking of big counties and not much else. This might be a way to put municipalities a little bit more on the map and have a little more political weight than they otherwise would. I know that there was some email traffic that maybe that isn't something to put forward to the Maryland Municipal League this year, that there may be other kinds of discussions that could take place about that. Whether or not you wish to do that is fine. I did include a legislative action request form for that proposal and include it in the draft language. In the alternative draft that I presented, I included some information on a proposal which would do something similar to what County Councilmember Berliner proposed and the County Council implemented in Montgomery County, and that Congressman Van Hollen's trying to do, which is to have financial incentives for green improvements to homes and apply that money as a lien on the property that could be paid off over time or passed on to future purchasers. I perhaps had misunderstood. I had thought that that was something that you wanted to put forward as a statewide bill as opposed to a legislative action request through the MML, so I did not include it in this package. Given the comments that I saw, I went ahead and added some language in the resolution, but I would need to mock up a draft legislative action request for that. And according to the email traffic, Jim Peck of the MML has some ideas about what that LAR should include. And I'd like to talk to him and have that structured so it's most helpful. So I don't have a draft LAR for that. Haven't had that conversation with Jim Peck yet. But that would be my intention if you decide to include that as part of your resolution tonight. We do need a council resolution saying that these are the kinds of legislative action requests you wish to put forward. They need to be submitted to the MML by Friday.
And if I can just add that I did have a brief conversation with Jim Peck at MML today, and he did encourage us to include that. He said that last year the legislature did pass the Jane Lawton Fund, but that there were some problems with the fund as passed, that there was an amendment offered that made it difficult to use it in the way in which it was intended, and there was also a drafting difficulty that made it so that the bond that was used to fund these improvements couldn't get repaid. So there are definite fixes that need to happen to that fund as established, and that is the opening to getting the type of program that we were looking for statewide. So I would recommend the Deputy City Manager's alternative draft of the resolution, and I'm sure we can come up with the appropriate language for the legislative action requests for MML by Friday. Comments? Councilmember Robinson.
The notion of the last whereas in the first draft that Susie talked about and that was based on conversation with folks from Broward County and expanding creation and expansion of municipalities. I mean, the conversation continued with us realizing that we don't understand everything about how this would play out in Maryland, and that in Annapolis we might be looked upon as not having done our proper homework. I'm of a mind to say, well, let's put it in there, and then we'll go about doing our homework and have the conversation begin and continue. I don't think it's the way it's written. I wonder if we're really going out on a big limb to leave it in here. I'm thinking we're not, that we're just bringing it up for conversation.
If we put it in as a legislative action request, somebody has to present it to the legislative committee and make the pitch that the committee should recommend it to the membership as a priority of the league.
I think one of the things that, it doesn't hurt to do that in one sense. It goes to a group of, I don't know, how many people are there, 25 members on the legislative committee. From what I've seen of those discussions, they're usually fairly brief, and they can be kind of curt. Well, this won't fly, and then they just move on or whatever. I think, that's kind of a flip a coin about how you'd like to proceed with that. What really gets you a little bit further is a different kind of series of discussions that build some alliances, and, you have some understanding before you go into the 5 minutes when they turn to that item and kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, and move on. And so it's, like I said, I think it's not likely to be endorsed by the legislative committee this year, in this whack. Whether or not that's a good first start of the conversation, it's up to you. But the other kind of work, those discussions, doing that homework, having those kind of, having that kind of investigation, is what will eventually have some outcomes, one way or
Right.
another.
So the question really is whether we want to just put it on the table, expecting it not to get very far this year, or not.
Councilmember Wright.
Mayor, since you sit on that committee
and hopefully sit on it again next year.
And hopefully sit on it again next year, which I think would be highly likely, and probably have the most experience with that committee. I guess I would ask 2 questions. One would be, does this make your job more difficult? Do people say to you, what are you guys thinking in Tacoma Park? This doesn't have a chance. Would be one question. And I guess the second question would be, is this something that you would want to spend your time advocating with those, because you probably have relationships with those people, your fellow committee members, more than anyone else. Is this something you'd want to spend your time advocating, bending their ear about? I mean, I know that Councilmember Robinson or other of us could do it also if we cared about it, but doing what Suzanne just described, having those conversations.
I think having the conversations at places like the convention or the legislative conference or chapter meetings or wherever might refine it and get it to where we would actually have a request. I think I see this as kind of pie in the sky that isn't going to fly. And if I were to present it at the legislative committee where things get proposed, it would be jumped all over and dispatched in 30 seconds.
How would it be? So you think it needs more legwork before it gets presented, basically? More legwork in the sense of both knowing more about the issues and so on, and also seeding around with different members of MML to get them not exactly on board, but at least comfortable. Is that what you're talking about?
I can imagine particular members who are always on the legislative committee going crazy with this, going, are you crazy? You're going to turn everybody against us and we're going to get nothing.
Right.
Everybody against us you mean in the count, as far as the counties go?
there will be a number of municipalities who will see it as a waste of time.
Well, that's good. Reality check. I mean, I understand. And I'm happy to do the homework to really come up to speed and find ways to explain it so that it makes a little more sense, other than just a few words here. So.
And it's always possible if it gets refined at the convention, we can put in a request late, and then it's up to the committee to accept late requests. And if it gets refined and there's a good reaction, we can put it in and it'll get considered.
Given that, I'm content to leave it out of, to accept the alternative draft personally.
Any other comments? Okay, so did we move the alternative draft?
I don't think you moved anything.
Second. Moved by Councilmember Siemens, second by Councilmember Snipper. Any further comments by the council? Any public comments? All those in favor of the resolution authorizing submission of the LARs to the MML, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Now we get to what many people thought might be a quick final item, which is the consent agenda item, but there's been a request to remove one item, and that Councilmember Snipper wanted to remove the last item, item G, and I wanted to note that there was a clerical error in item F, establishing a small community grant program, and that should have read that for the committee appointment, the 6 council members and the mayor each get to appoint.
Oh, the mayor.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we'll remove item G and vote on the remaining consent agenda items, which are the single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a demolition contract for 6614 Allegheny Avenue.
With the correction.
And the resolutions authorizing execution of the memorandum of agreement with Old Tacoma Business Association, the execution of the memorandum of agreement with Crossroads Farmers Market, endorse the purchase of 7411 Aspen Court by the HOC, resolution appointing Tacoma Park Poet Laureate, and the resolution establishing the small community grant program. So all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And now item G. Oh, yep, roll call vote. Sorry, single reading ordinance. Clerk, please call a roll. Councilmember Siemens moved it. Councilmember Snipper second.
Mayor Williams?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay? Councilmember Robinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Snipper?
Aye.
Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Final item, resolution authorizing execution of a memorandum of agreement for the continuation of the Community Indicators Project. Councilmember Snipper.
As I've indicated on several occasions, I support the Community Indicators Project. I don't support city funding for the Indicators Project, and that's why I have requested that be removed, and I will vote against spending city funding for this activity.
And Councilmember Snipper, may I ask your rationale?
Yes, I didn't want to repeat what I said before, but I'm happy to summarize my argument, which is that I think the indicators are a great help to the citizens, but I don't believe that they are specific enough. They're not tied to programs, functions, or activities of the city in a direct way, so that the answers to the questions that are on the project or the numbers we get are not tied to specific programs in a way that we could use them for some kind of action. They're just too general. and I prefer spending city money on getting specific staff.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
I share some of Councilmember Snipper's concern. I haven't seen in the first set of numbers, this was a concern from mine from the beginning also about, was this going to give us something concrete enough where we would change our policy? I share some of that concern based on the first numbers that we saw, but I'm willing to continue to go forward because there was some numbers in there that I think could be helpful with comparisons with the county. And in talking to Bruce Baker, I think there'll be more numbers forthcoming. But my support for funding in future years, I think, is, I would say, in a short leash, in the sense that if I don't see more that's actionable, and if the Community Indicators Project doesn't bring in additional funds to kind of go along with the funds that we've been providing, I'm not sure I would support in future years.
Councilmember Robinson.
I'm pretty close to Councilmember Wright's position. I'd like to see the numbers connect with our staff's efforts in some way. If we're spending city money, I'd like to see it reflected in how the staff, in something really positive that the staff gets from it, as if they were doing their own research. But I'm willing to go with this year, and I think Bruce Baker knows that's my position as well.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. I also support this, and I think that this discussion should be instructive to Mr. Baker on what this council is hoping to see, and maybe some modification of the approach can ensure continued funding in the future years.
A question of the city manager. In the voting on this resolution, what's the required number, what's your sense of the required number of yes votes for it to be approved and final? And since we're operating currently with a council of 6, I know that 4 is still a majority, and there's only 5 of us here tonight. Is a 3-2 a majority and it's over, or does it need to be 4-1?
I believe it still needs to be 4 council members. I'm going to look to the city clerk.
Right. President voting, so it's a quorum of the president.
There'll be 3 and 2 then.
3-2.
Majority of the president.
Okay. Any other council comments? Any public comment? All those in favor of the resolution authorizing the memorandum of agreement, the continuation of the Community Indicators Project funding, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Passes 3-2. And we're adjourned for the evening.